Hello, welcome to Pompous Unhelpful Knit and the first in-person video. This is very exciting. I've wanted to do this for a very, very long time. And I was inspired by Mike's Pretty Little Liars series. So if you haven't seen that, then definitely watch it because it's where I got the inspiration to do all of this. So first of all, I'm going to give a brief introduction to what H20 Just Add Water is about. So for anyone that doesn't know, H20 Just Add Water is a TV show. It's Australian. It came out on Nickelodeon, I believe, in 2006. July 2006 was when the first episode was aired. And the show is all about three teenage girls that magically get this secret power that whenever they touch water, they turn into mermaids. And it's brilliant. It's absolutely fantastic. So the main characters of the show, we have three main characters. And I do have a pointer, but so I didn't have a baton, but I do have a knife. Anyway, so our three main characters of the show, we have Emma Gilbert, we have Cleo Satori, and we have Ricky Chadwick. So those are the three main girls of the show, and they're the ones that have this mermaid affliction. So whenever they touch water, they turn into mermaids. Oh yeah, so by the way, this board is just season 1 of H20 Just Add Water. So main characters of season 1, Emma Gilbert, Cleo Satori, and Ricky Chadwick. But Sorry, there's been a casualty. Lewis McCartney is also a massive character in the show. He's kind of like 3+1. So we have the three main girls, and then we have +1 Lewis. He's kind of always there. To describe Emma in 3 words, buy the books. To describe Cleo in 3 words, in season 1, I might add, a little bit immature, sweet, a little bit naive. Ricky, slay, badass, fiery. That's her description words. Yeah, so I guess we'll talk about how it was first received. It was received very well. It was received very well. It's recently become more popular because of the whole like TikToks of people imitating their accents, because obviously they're Australian, so they sound quite funny. People have been doing that whole like, oh no, the condensation. That's come back recently, and I think it's become a little bit more popular because of that. So that's brilliant. It's getting the attention that it deserves. But don't get me wrong, when it first came out, it was very popular. It was very iconic. Another iconic thing about the show, the theme song. Everyone's heard of the theme song. I'm not going to sing it because I don't want to embarrass myself even more, but it's very good. So anyway, brief introduction of the show. It ran for 3 seasons. I'm just going to be talking about season 1 and 2 in this video because season 3, we'll talk about it later, but there's some shit that happens that I don't really want to talk about. The first episode, I'm going to go into lots of detail because it's the first episode of the season, so hold on to your hats. So we start off at the swimming pool, and we find out that Emma is like a really good swimmer, and she's like swimming and she's competing, and Cleo is also there, and she is timing her, and she's watching Emma, and she's like, oh my god, you're so good at swimming, and Emma's like, oh my god, yeah, my best time yet. And at this point in the show, Cleo's kind of like she's a bit awkward in the first season, so she's kind of in awe of Emma. She kind of thinks, not in awe, but like she admires her because she's really good at something, and Cleo isn't that good at anything yet. Then we're introduced to one of my least favorite characters of the whole show, Zane. So Zane is this boy here. He is just an awful person. He is rich, he's entitled, he's not trustworthy, and he has terrible friends. We see Zane working on his boat by the harbour, and then he like asks Cleo for help. She kind of reluctantly, says that she'll help him. And he's like, oh, someone stole my spark plug. And she's like, oh no, that's really sad. And then when Cleo is on the boat helping Zane, he pushes the boat away, and then she's just stranded on the boat. And then he's like, oh, Sike, like you don't have a spark plug. So she's just drifting away because she doesn't have the spark plug. Also, Nate is there. Shit. I forgot Nate. Okay, so just like imagine. I'll put a flash on the screen of what Nate looks like. And Nate is wearing a criminal outfit. Makes me want to be sick. So Nate's character is interesting because he's basically just like horny friend of Zane's that's kind of like a servant, and he helps him with his evil schemes. But then in season 3, he has a few more like solo plot points and also a musical number. So then we're introduced to our second main girl, Ricky, Chadwick. So Ricky comes out of nowhere and she just like jumps onto the boat when Cleo's drifting away on it, and she's like, Sike, I've got the spark plug. And Zane's like, oh no. From this interaction, we learned that Ricky is kind of a badass. She's a bit pesky and edgy and kind of a bit thief vibes, but in a cool way. And then Ricky fixes the boat and they're like, well, we might as well just have some fun and ride around a bit. And they splash Zane when they're like sailing past him and he's absolutely fuming about it. So then we get a really nice montage of like kind of establishing shots of Australia, because we're in Australia, remember? Then they happen to bump into Emma, our third main girl of the show. So they bump into Emma, who's out for a stroll, and Cleo's like, do you want to ride? And we get this iconic Emma-Ricky interaction where Emma's like, are you licensed? And Ricky's like, are you my mother? And then Emma's like, So this is a very typical like Emma-Ricky kind of situation. They're always kind of bickering. They have a bit of a fiery friendship because they're complete opposites. That's why they're on opposite sides of the board. That was very much intentional. So Emma is kind of like by the books, kind of straight-laced, you know, hardworking swimmer gal. And then Ricky's kind of a bit of a loose cannon, shall we say. They're both friends, don't get me wrong, they're friends, but they do often clash and kind of argue because of their differences. So immediately Emma has concerns when she gets on the boat with Cleo and Ricky. She's like, this motor isn't going to last very long, so we should turn back. And Ricky's like, no, it's fine. Cut to a few moments later and the boat isn't moving. And this shot of the boat not moving is really funny because you can see that the water's really shallow and they're supposed to be out in the middle of the ocean, and you're like, okay. They're stranded, the boat isn't working, and Emma's doing the whole like I told you so bit because she could see this coming. And then Ricky suggests paddling to this nearby mysterious island, which is Mako Island. So Mako Island is such an important location in the show that it gets a little photo of its own because a lot of shit goes down on this crusted little island. Mako Island, swampy, dangerous, magic. Ricky's like, let's go to this island that's conveniently just there. And then Emma and Cleo are like, no, bruv, it's a literal shark breeding ground. Like, we're gonna die. And Ricky's like, okay, well, it's either that or we stay here and die in the middle of the ocean. So Emma's like, okay, fair. And it's immediately shown as this like kind of wild, swampy, dangerous place. There are snakes, spiders, overgrown plants. It's just really not safe. So the girls pull up on Zane's boat and Emma and Ricky immediately start arguing, of course, because Emma's mad because she told Ricky that it wasn't a good idea. And Ricky's like, okay, well, I got us on the island in the first place. And Cleo's just there. So Emma, she's like, okay, maybe we can call for help. So she pulls out her flip phone and there's no service. And I'm like, yeah, of course. But they go and look for a high point to go and get service. So then they're trekking through the jungle and they get to this rock that they need to jump over. So Emma jumps over the rock, it's all good, it's all fine. Ricky jumps over the rock, it's all good, it's all fine. And then Cleo jumps and she falls in this massive hole in the ground. And we get this really brilliant shot of her feet like kind of falling down the hole. The girls are like, Cleo, are you okay? And then she just kind of says nothing. And then she's like, I'm okay, but I can't get up the tunnel because I've hurt my leg. So then Emma goes down the tunnel and then Ricky also just shoots down really quick. And Emma's like, what the fuck are you doing? You were supposed to stay up there and throw down a rope. And Ricky's like, babe, where am I supposed to find a rope on this crusted little island? This is another classic Emma-Ricky argument. So then they walk through this little cave in the tunnel and they find the moon pool. So the moon pool is on Mako Island, and it's also a very big key location of the show. Lots of plot lines happening in this little jacuzzi. So the girls are like, oh my God, this pool is stunning. And Emma's like, okay, I think we can swim and get back to the ocean if we swim through the cave. So then Emma dives in the pool in her clothes, I might add, when it's probably freezing. And then the other girls, she dives in the pool, but she has a swimming costume underneath her clothes. So it's like, just doesn't really make sense. So then Emma comes back and she's like, yeah, just what I thought, it leads back to the bloody ocean. And Ricky's like, okay, amazing. Let me take my shoes off and jump in and go with you. And then we get this slow zoom on Cleo's face and she's like, bruv, I can't swim. And then we see a really quick insert shot of a full moon rising above Mako Island. And it's funny because the moon always like ends up going right above the cave here in this little spot. So this is really important. We'll come back to this later. So Emma and Ricky are in the water, freezing, and Cleo's just sitting there kind of having a tantrum, refusing to go in because she can't swim. And at this point in the show, Cleo's just quite annoying. She's quite immature. She's just like half sitting in the water in her clothes, like, just get in. Ricky finally helps Cleo get in the water, and as she does, the moon rises over the top of the cave and the water in the pool starts bubbling. And they're like, oh, that's kind of weird. Like maybe someone farted, but they just don't really acknowledge it. And then they just kind of go. So they swim out and they end up like kind of like here in the water, magically in the middle of the ocean. And then someone shines a light on them and we hear a voice and it's like, hands up, it's the water police. So then they all get on the boat. Cut to the next day. It's a beautiful day, sunny Australia. Emma is going for a swim on the beach. Everything's great until she looks down after she touches the water and she has a freaking tail. So she's absolutely traumatized. And we assume that she swims away or gets out somehow without someone seeing her, because otherwise she'd just be flopping around on the beach with a tail. Then we see Ricky in the garden, and then the water sprinkler comes on and it splashes her, and then she's lying on the grass in like full tail mode. Then we see Cleo having a bath, and she's got a full tail as well. So they're all like, bruv. The girls have a meeting and they're like, what do we do about this? And also note Cleo's headband in the scene, insert picture of Cleo's headband. And Emma's like, okay, we're gonna get in so much trouble from our parents if we tell them. And I'm like, would you though? Like, surely if you told your parents that you become a mermaid, they won't be like, oh my God, you've only gone and done it. You've only gone and become a bloody mermaid. Because it's not something they intentionally set out to do. So I don't really get the whole thing like, oh my God, we'll be in so much trouble. It's like, no, your parents would probably be like, oh my God, are you okay? Yeah, so they have their little meeting. And they're like, okay, we can't tell anyone about this because we'll get in so much trouble. And then we get introduced to another iconic character, Lewis McCartney, who's maybe my favorite character of the whole show. I just love Lewis. Lewis is just, to describe Lewis in 3 words, he's nerdy, caring, and he has a boat. More on Lewis's boat later on. Lewis, he turns up at Cleo's house and he's like, I thought we were doing biology homework. And she's like, sorry, Cleo. No, Cleo's like, sorry, Lewis, like, we're not doing biology homework anymore. And she kind of like ushers him out the house. And he's like, oh, what the fuck? I thought we were doing homework. And she's like, yeah, just go. And she's being like really shady about it all. And then she's like, oh, real quick, before you go, do you know anything about mermaids? And the girls are like, Cleo, what the fuck? And he's obviously confused. He's like, no, I don't know anything about mermaids. So poor Lewis, he's ushered out the house, just fixing my wall with a knife. Also, in this scene, Cleo's giving kind of toddler that just learned how to dress herself vibes because of her outfit. Insert picture on the screen. Out of all the girls, Cleo is the least thrilled about being a mermaid because she can't swim, bruv. So Emma and Ricky go for a swim and they're absolutely loving life, and we get our first underwater swimming montage, which is beautiful. These are probably the best parts of the show because it's like they're with the coral, there's turtles, there's fish, there's wildlife. Don't get me wrong, if this show was filmed now, there would be nothing there. But this was shot in 2006, so there was still wildlife and nature because the planet wasn't burning alive. Then we get introduced to a next iconic character / location, which is also going to print a picture of, but then I freaking forgot. But it is the Juice Net Cafe. So I do have beef with the Juice Net Cafe because it is a scam. That's the only way I can put it. It is an absolute scam. But it's kind of the local hangout spot for everyone on the show. Like whenever they're not in school, they're at the Juice Net Cafe. Whenever they're about to go to school, they're at the Juice Net Cafe, and they're always buying drinks. So it's like, and they don't really have jobs. Like Cleo gets a job kind of later on. Emma gets a job a little bit later on as well. But it's like, where are you getting the pocket money? Like, how do you have the budget to have multiple drinks a day at this crusty little cafe, which is owned by Wilfred? So anyway, Lewis is at the cafe and he's researching mermaids because he's a nerd. One thing about Lewis, he will always be learning, coding, typing, researching, making up programs that no one really cares about besides him. He does try very hard, but his efforts don't always lead to good results. Cleo and Lewis are walking out of the cafe, and then who comes along? Menace of the Century, Zane Bennett. And they are absolutely frightened. It might as well be a Western cowboy confrontation because Cleo and Lewis are both absolutely quaking in their boots when they see him. So they start having a fight on the street, and Zane is being horrid to both of them. And then Cleo spots this fire hydrant and she's like, So she starts looking at it. And then we get the first hand gesture mermaid power scene of the series. So basically, the girls don't realize that they have special mermaid powers. And when they do this, they can control water. So Cleo starts doing this with the fire hydrant, and then water shoots out of it, and Zane goes like flying along the street. And Lewis and Cleo think it's like really funny because it is really funny. So then we cut to Ricky and Emma walking home, and they're buzzing about their tails, and then Cleo runs up and she's like, shit guys, we also have powers. And then she shows them her powers. So Cleo's powers are she can move and control water. And then Emma sees Cleo like controlling the water, and she thinks it's going to fall on her. So she goes like this. But then when she does this, it freezes the water. So we learned that Emma's power is freezing water. Then Ricky, she's like trying to find her powers, but she can't find them. So they all have a little laugh about it, and then that's the end of the first episode. Bruv. All of that, and that was only episode 1, and I've been recording for 20 minutes. Great. So for the rest of the season, I'm going to give a kind of briefer, broader recap of the whole thing, but give like kind of key moments, key plot points, go into detail about that kind of stuff, but I'm going to be kind of skimming over it and not going into enormous detail unless it's important. Otherwise, I would literally be here for the length of the entire show. And that's why I'm making this video, so you don't have to watch the entire show, but you should. It comes across way more threatening when I'm holding a knife, but you should. So, at the start of episode 2, key things to remember. Emma and Ricky love being mermaids, but Cleo hates it because she can't swim, bruv. Then we see the girls kind of struggling with some of the usual tasks that they had to do, like washing up, taking showers, all that kind of stuff, because there's a bit of an adjustment. So they're adjusting. But Ricky's swimming with dolphins, and she's absolutely thriving and loving life. It's the best thing that's ever happened to her. So then we bump into Miriam at the Gooseneck Cafe. And Miriam is kind of one of the villains of the season. So her kind of keywords, she's popular, she's not very smart, and she dates Zane, but she also doesn't. She's just kind of like there. And he kind of treats her like shit and hangs out with her when he feels like it, but he's not very nice to her. And she's usually wearing a pink velour tracksuit. That's basically it. That's everything you need to know about Miriam. They see Miriam at the Gooseneck Cafe, and Cleo is really desperate to be cool at this point in the show, and she really wants to be liked by her. And they see Miriam, and she manages to bag an invite to her sick pool party. But the girls are like, you can't go, because if you do and get water on you, then we're fucked. And Cleo's like, no, I won't let being a mermaid get in the way of me having a good time. So the girls go to the beach to do an experiment and see if they can stand in the water and will themselves to not be mermaid. So they go to the beach and they're standing in the water and they're like, no tail, no tail, no tail. And then Emma and Ricky look at each other and they're like, tail. And then they like fall and flop around in the water. Cleo refuses to participate because at this point she's still annoying. Then Lewis turns up on the beach. And the girls quickly hide behind a rock because they're in full tail mode. And he's like, can I stay here? And they're like, no, we're naked. And then he's like, and? So there's a bit of a kerfuffle here of Lewis being kicked out of his favourite secret private fishing spot. He's like, Cleo, I showed you this fishing spot in private. And now you've showed all your friends here and now they're hanging out naked. So they kick Lewis away. There's a bit of a kerfuffle at the Gooseneck Cafe with Lewis and Zane, but it's quite mild, so I'm not getting into it. The girls make ice lollies with their powers whilst they complain about being mermaids, and Ricky's like, are you kidding me? You can literally make ice lollies with your hands, so stop complaining about being a mermaid. Then there's some shit with Cleo practicing not getting wet for the pool party, and Emma has a moody teen moment with her mum. And then, final power alert, Ricky gets her power. So Ricky is like speaking to Lewis and she gets kind of mad, and then she realizes that she can heat up water and create heat. And I feel really bad for Lewis because he turns up to his fishing spot again and the girls are also there in their tails again, and they tell him to fuck off because they're having a girly chat, and he's like, bro, this is literally my spot and you've stolen it. So yeah, Lewis is going through it at this point in the season. Then Cleo turns up to Miriam's pool party in a tragic outfit. Then the boys start teasing her. And we get this like POV shot of Cleo being teased, and it's kind of sad. Then as Lewis enters the party, the boys are throwing Cleo into the freaking pool and everyone is watching. So Lewis then sees Cleo with her tail after all the people have gone away. So basically, that doesn't really make sense. Basically, the boys are throwing Cleo into the pool. They throw her in the pool just as Lewis walks in. After they throw her in the pool, they all leave and go to another room, which is very convenient. Then Lewis goes over to the swimming pool and Cleo's like, oh, there's something I need to tell you. And then she turns into a mermaid. Lewis sees this. He's beyond shocked. He's absolutely shocked. So she begs him for help and she's like, you have to help me. Like, you can't tell anyone about this. So then Emma and Ricky turn up and they freeze the front door to stop people from getting out. And I'm like, what water was on the doorknob that you could freeze? But anyway, they help Cleo, and then Ricky has this really cool trick because she can create heat. She can like dry off their tails. So if they have tails, she can like heat it up so that they go back to human form. So Ricky like gives her a little steam and gets rid of the tail. And then for good measure, they heat up and evaporate all the water in the swimming pool, and Miriam's pool party is ruined. Then we have a quick interaction with the next character, Byron. So Byron is a bit of an important character in season 1. He's kind of like a love interest vibes, but I won't say for who yet. I'm not going to spoil it. So they bump into Byron, they all think he's really fit, and then they're like, oh, did you go to Miriam's party? And he's like, who's Miriam? And they're all like, ha ha ha, he doesn't know who Miriam is. And they think that's really funny. Now, Lewis knows about all 3 of them being mermaids. And this is kind of the main thing of the show. The girls get into situations, they ask Lewis for help, he tries, but he kind of fucks up, and then it continues over and over again. So he's like trying to help them not get exposed and ending up as science experiments. And yeah, that's pretty much his role in the show. He just like helps them, but he kind of messes up all the time. It really reminds me of the video game Octodad. So at the start of episode 3, we meet 2 more important characters. These are Cleo's mum, dad, so mum, Bev, dad, Donald, and little sister, Kim. So let's talk about Kim. Kim is like typical annoying younger sibling vibes. She just wants to make life hard for Cleo for absolutely no reason. So we find out that Cleo has been paying her little sister to do the dishes because she can't really wash up anymore. Then there's not much to catch up on in this episode, but I do want to keep a tally as we go of the absolute ridiculous drinks that the girls are buying from the Juicenet Cafe. It's just a scam. So Juicenet Cafe, you think smoothies, milkshakes, yummy drinks, milkshakes, that kind of stuff. But these girls will literally just go to the Juicenet Cafe and buy a cranberry juice with a sprig of mint in it. And I'm like how do you have the pocket money to do that? And like not even good drinks. So in this episode, the girls are drinking what looks like apple and orange juice mixed together with a bit of lime in it. Screaming and crying. So I just know that with the Juicenet Cafe, in every episode, the production designer was like, shit, we need a new drink. And then they just poured any random drink that they had on set into a glass and they're like, yeah, that's good enough. At this point in the show, Cleo still doesn't want to swim, and the girls are talking about how amazing it is to swim, and Cleo's just like, sorry, no, new topic, babe. I just want to talk about maths homework. And she's like, question 7's a nightmare. So in this episode, long story short, Cleo finds out about turtles getting stuck in nets on the beach. She wants to save the turtles, basically. And Cleo's dad is a fisherman. Mr. Satori is an absolute fisherman. And she's worried that his nets are catching the turtles, but he tells her that they aren't. But then when the girls visit Dad's boat, they see some of his crew using the wrong nets and catching turtles. So they set them free and tell Cleo, and then Cleo's really upset with her dad. Also, the next time they're in the Juicenet Cafe, they're having what looks like cranberry juice and lemon juice with some fig coconut bites, maybe? Cleo's depressed about the turtles, and she goes back to her dad's boat and sees the crew using the wrong nets again, and this time she decides to do something about it. So after being depressed about being a mermaid for a while, she finally gets in the water and goes after the boat to free the turtles, but then she gets in one of the nets. She gets trapped. And she nearly gets caught by one of her dad's crew members. But then the girls save her, and Cleo is finally over her fear of water, and she goes swimming with her friends, and we get this amazing special effects of their tails in the sea. So that's basically that. So now, summary, they all like swimming. Cleo finally likes swimming. After spending so long being a little baby about it, she finally gets in the sea. So, next few key things. Basically, Cleo likes swimming now, and she gets a job working at the dolphin tank at this like SeaWorld aquarium place, which is called the Marine Park. That's a big location for the rest of the show. Emma is fucking fuming about this. She goes out swimming with the dolphins in the sea, and she finds this cool old necklace at the bottom of the ocean, which is the one that she's wearing there. This becomes important later on. So Cleo does this dolphin show at the theme park, and this weird old lady keeps looking at her, and Cleo's like, And the weird old lady is, of course, Mrs. Chatham. So Mrs. Chatham is a very big character in season 1. More on that later. And I have this lovely meme photo of her. I was taking screenshots of the show, and I found this, like, when I paused at a funny place, it made her face go like this, and I thought it was funny. The lady comes and talks to Cleo after the show, and she's like saying a bunch of really cryptic comments. She's just like, she's like, oh, the sea really stings when it gets in your eyes, doesn't it? And then Cleo's like, I don't know about that. And then she's like, oh, except when you're underwater. And Cleo's like, Meanwhile, Lewis is running around doing tests on the girls and spraying them with different types of water to see what concentration turns them into a mermaid. So in this episode, the main plot point is Emma is like scared of having an annual sleepover party because she's worried she's going to get wet and then turn into a mermaid in front of everyone. But Ricky and Cleo convince her to do it anyway. Cleo gets her drink spilled on her, but she gets in a sleeping bag so no one sees her tail. Miriam crashes the sleepover party and tries to steal Emma's new necklace. That's basically it. Cleo gets another one, finds the second, I don't know how to say this. Basically, this necklace that Emma finds is very important. It's very important because it's part of a set. There are 3 of these necklaces. Emma finds the first one in the ocean. Cleo finds the second one somewhere else. I can't remember. I can't talk. Then the next episode is maybe my least favorite of the whole show. I skip it every time, no shade. Basically, Menace of the Millennium Kim reads Cleo's diary and starts to think that Cleo is a mermaid, but she thinks that Miriam is like the leader of the mermaids. So there's this whole parade thing, and Kim throws water on Miriam to expose her, and then Cleo's like, well, Kim just got punked. And Kim gets in trouble for throwing water on Miriam. Also in this episode, Kim works with Emma's younger brother, Elliot, who we haven't seen yet. This is Elliot. He's Emma's younger brother. He's the same age as Cleo's younger sister, Kim. So Kim tries to convince Elliot that Emma's also a mermaid and stuff, and they kind of work together. But then he's like kind of over it by the end of the episode. He's like, Kim, shut up. Like, you're just doing some shit. The drink of choice in this episode is, no, not a Negroni, but Robinson's orange squash or some other shit. It's literally just diluting juice. The Juice in It Cafe is an absolute scam. Then in the next episode, basically, Ricky babysits Elliot at the beach while he's doing surfing lessons, and then he tries to surf without his instructor and he nearly drowns, bruv. But Ricky sees him, and you might be thinking, oh my god, so Elliot knows that they're mermaids. No, he doesn't see her tail, but he just thinks she's a really, really fast swimmer. So for the rest of the episode, he has a big fat steaming crush on Ricky, and Emma thinks it's really cute, but that she should let him down easy. Elliot starts buying her chocolate and presents and shit and like really expensive gifts. And there's this great line where Wilfred, the owner of the Juice Net Cafe, is like to Elliot, oh, did your girlfriend like the chocolates? And then Ricky chokes. Then Ricky gets mad at Elliot and she's like, obviously I don't like you, you're a kid, leave me alone. Then Elliot is #depressed for a while. He buys this glass dolphin for her and then cries on the beach and throws it in the sea. And then he hides in this like greenhouse thing, and Ricky tries to find him and nearly gets sprayed by the timer water sprinklers. And there's some like tension as she's trying to get out of the greenhouse before she gets sprayed, but they find Elliot. And then he's not depressed anymore, and Ricky's like, you should like girls your own age. Actually, to be honest, let's go into it. Elliot's love life is a bit of a mess in this show. So he has a crush on Ricky, obviously, at one point, and that's really intense. But he also has a big crush on Kim later on in the show, and she treats him like absolute shit. She is so nasty to this poor boy. So yeah, poor Elliot. He has a bad time. The next episode is very interesting, so strap your boots on, because it's the first time that we see the effect of the full moon on the girls. So basically, the full moon is what transformed them into mermaids, right? But the full moon also has an effect on them when they are already mermaids, and like whenever the moon rises, like it will make them do kind of weird stuff. So that was explained very badly. At the start of the episode, we see the old lady, Mrs. Chatham, and she speaks to Cleo, and she's like, be aware of the full moon. Cleo's like, God, what? This is the first warning we get. And this is what you're saying? This is the first time we get an idea that the moon has a weird effect on mermaids. And this becomes a big feature in the show. Nearly every season finale, mid-season finale, there's like a full moon and some shenanigans go on. In this episode, Emma is throwing a surprise party for her dad, Neil Gilbert, who is a major DILF, by the way. And at the party, Emma catches sight of the moonlight, and then the evening gets a bit ratchet. So Emma basically sees the full moon, and then she starts acting really weird. And she's like being really unfiltered and saying rude things to all the guests, and she's eating like a maniac, and like she's just, you know, being crazy. And then she gets enticed by the sea and she jumps into the ocean. So then Emma's dad turns up at the surprise party, and Emma's mum is like, yeah, look, Emma threw this massive surprise party for you. This is Emma's mum, Lisa. And then he's like, okay, but where is Emma? And they're all like, yeah, I don't really know. And then we just see Emma like flopping around in the sea. So Cleo and Ricky go and try and find Emma, and they find her, and then they coax her into the jacuzzi because her tail like won't dry. So Ricky tries to use her powers on her, but like she can't go back to human form. So they're like, okay, we're gonna have to hide her. So they give her some tins of sardines because she's got absolute cravings, bruv. And then our first bit of romance drama in the show, besides the shit that happens with Elliot. So Byron is at the party and he comes out. Emma's like, Byron, come over here, Byron. He goes over to her and then they kiss. So Emma was supposed to do a speech at the party, but she can't do it because she's busy being feral. So then Cleo does this like weird speech thing where she's like, dads are really important. And then everyone's confused because they're like, where is Emma? There's this whole shit with like Lisa. She buys these really expensive seafood platters for the party. But then Emma goes crazy and she eats all the seafood platters. And then all the guests go to see the food and it's not there. And they all get really like weirdly mad about it and leave. They're like, what kind of a party is this? And they all storm out. They all end up going to the Juice Net Cafe to sleep overnight because they don't want anyone to see Emma's tail. And then when they wake up, Emma's tail is finally gone, but she doesn't remember anything that happened the night before. So she goes home in the dress that she was wearing the night before, which is very morning after vibes. And her dad is quite confused. He's like, bruv, what happened last night? And she's just like, oh, like, I'm a teenager. And that's her excuse. She's just like, oh, sometimes I just like do weird shit. And then Emma bumps into Byron at the Juice Net Cafe the next day. And he's like, you're a really great kisser. And Emma's like, what? We kissed? And she has no memory of it. So it's like very traumatizing for her. I need coffee. It's cold. So in the next episode, we are introduced to the next villain of the season, Dr. Denman. Dun, dun, dun. So this is a marine biologist that comes to the area to do some tests and stuff on the local wildlife. And Lewis has a big fat steaming crush on Dr. Denman. So he's testing some samples of the girl's skin and he stupidly leaves one of the samples in the lab that he's in and then she sees it. And she sees that this is a normal human skin cell, but when you just add water to it, it turns into a scale. And she's like, bruh, the entire molecular structure of this cell is changing. And he's just like, no. So she asks Lewis about it, and then he tells the girls, and he's like, by the way, this thing has happened, and they're fucking fuming. They're absolutely fuming. And this is just a classic example of Lewis trying to help and fucking up and putting all of their lives in danger. So Lewis goes on this diving trip with Dr. Denman, and the girls try to sabotage him as a bit of payback and a prank. And he's really mad about it because working with her is a great opportunity for him. Eventually, Cleo speaks to Lewis and she's like, bruv, you need to be careful because we're legit mermaids and if we get caught, we're going to die. So then he tries to speak to Dr. Denman to ask her to destroy the cell sample and she's like, sorry, I can't do that. And he's like, what? So Lewis tells the girlies in the Juice Net Cafe, and in this episode, they're drinking cranberry juice. The girls drink cranberry juice quite a lot. So the girls have UTIs, they're drinking cranberry juice. And at the end of the episode, they manage to steal the sample from Dr. Denman's boat while Lewis is talking to Dr. Denman and distracting her. So the next episode is all filler, no killer. All filler, no killer. It's not bad, it's just not my favorite. So basically, Cleo's fish dies. Also, side note, you might notice that I have Hector the fish on the board, and you might be thinking, okay, but Hector isn't actually in season 1. Yes, Hector is in season 1, we just don't see him. There is another fish that Cleo has in season 1, but he dies and we never really see him. So I didn't really want to put him on the board because Hector has much more of a big plot point in season 2 and he technically is in season 1, we just don't see him. There's no line connecting Mr. Satori and Hector because they don't have any interactions that I know of. So Cleo's fish dies in this episode and Ricky isn't very good at comforting her because it's just a fish. So they go and buy a new fish and then Ricky gets involved in this like illegal scheme of like buying fish for this pet breeder. And she thinks it's like a legit situation, but he turns out to be selling fish illegally and she's like, shit. So then Cleo gets a new fish called Hector. That's where Hector comes in. He comes in like mid-season 1. So in the next episode, there's like a film competition about local heroes. And the girls group together to make a documentary about someone Emma thinks is a hero, her mum, Lisa Gilbert. But her mum is telling an interesting story, but she's just telling it in a really bad way. So the documentary is like really boring. So Ricky's like, fuck this, I'm gonna go make my own documentary. And they're also competing against Zane, who wants to make a documentary about his dad's world record for sailing. And then he wants to like beat the record for sailing. Yeah, he tries to film this documentary, but then he gets attacked by sharks and he gets it all on film. Ricky makes an amazing documentary about the ocean and stuff, but she gets like really, really like deep underwater footage, and the girls are like, bruv, you can't use this footage because everyone's going to be like, how did you get that deep underwater? Like, no diver can go there. And then people would be like sketchy about how she got the footage, and they'd figure out that she was a mermaid, because clearly that's the first, you know, logical answer. Yeah, next episode, Emma used to be a swimming queen. She used to compete and stuff, but now she's a mermaid. She can't swim in the pool. Yeah, that's sad for her, but she's happy because her crush Byron asked her to help him train for a competition, and she agrees to help because smelly little Zane keeps saying that he's like gonna beat him. So she trains with Byron, and they kind of have a few arguments about it because like he's really laid back and she's not. And then they decide not to train together anymore so it doesn't ruin their relationship, and then they kiss. Points for Emma, except not, because her season 2 love interest is just so much better. Byron is fine, but he's just, his personality is bland. Very, very bland. Sorry, Byron. Side note, in this episode, they're drinking apple juice out of plastic cups. So the next episode is one I personally cannot stand. It's just bad vibes. So basically, it's another full moon business, except this time the full moon hits Cleo and it makes her have a really good singing voice. It basically makes her be like the siren, you know, the mermaid siren. So when she sings, all the boys are like mesmerized by her. And she sings on the radio, and then like boys from all over the country are like lining up outside her house to hear her singing voice. But then the curse breaks and it stops, and then she sings like really badly again, and she's like, oh. So then in the next episode, we find out how much of a piece of shit Zane is. Zane is just an absolute nasty, nasty boy. The girls witness an argument between Mrs. Chatham and Zane, where Zane is saying that Mrs. Chatham, she lives on a boat. That's important. She lives on a boat, and the girls find out that Zane is accusing Mrs. Chatham of like scratching his boat with her boat. They have a fight, and Zane says that he's going to report her to the police and get her boat taken away. And then Mrs. Chatham is like, no, it's my home. And then she has a heart attack. Zane is so nasty. Mrs. Chatham is now homeless because they take her boat away. So Emma's like, don't worry, you can like live with me. So Mrs. Chatham stays with Emma and her family, and she gives the girls some like juicy mermaid knowledge. And she tells them more about her life when she was a mermaid. So we basically find out that like Mrs. Chatham, oh yeah, that's kind of a big piece of tea. Basically, Mrs. Chatham used to be a mermaid. That's why she was so interested in Cleo and like her necklace and stuff, because the necklace is part of like a set, and she used to have one of the necklaces, and she was a mermaid with like 2 other girls in like the 60s or something. Then she tells Emma that she needs to protect her treasure, which is on the boat, and she's like, you must go and find my treasure, because if anyone finds it, I'm screwed. So Mrs. Chatham breaks away from Emma's house one night and tries to steal her boat back. And then Zane finds out and catches up with her. He gets on the boat and tries to steal her treasure because he's an absolute piece of shit, bruv. And then Mrs. Chatham has another heart attack, and Emma and Lewis catch up on Lewis's boat. Lewis's boat, character of its own. And they're like, Zane, you piece of shit, did you kill Mrs. Chatham? And then he's panicking and like looking for the treasure and stuff. And then there's a gas leak and the boat goes on fire and it starts smoking. Bruv. So Emma and Lewis rescue Mrs. Chatham, who's still passed out because she had a heart attack. Lewis takes her on his boat and he's like, I'm going to take her to the hospital. And then Emma's like, okay, well, we can't exactly leave Zane because he's on a burning boat. It's going to sink. So Lewis takes Mrs. Chatham on his boat back to the mainland to go to the hospital. We don't see this. And Emma's like, I'm going to have to save Zane because otherwise he's going to die. So by this point, the boat's sinking. Emma dives in underwater and she uses her tail to beat the door open. She saves Zane. And even though he's dying of literally no oxygen, he opens his eyes and he sees a flash of her tail. So this is a key plot point in season 1 because afterwards, Zane is convinced that he's seen a sea monster, and the rest of the season is about him trying to find this sea monster. Emma pulls him onto Mako Island and they're on the beach, and he's like, I saw a monster. And she's like, no, you didn't. You didn't see shit. So now Zane is even more of a threat than he was before, besides literally killing old ladies and giving them heart attacks because he's trying to steal their belongings. So not much worth mentioning in the next episode, but basically Cleo has a birthday party. She hates her birthdays because every year her dad, Mr. Satori, he throws really embarrassing kid parties for her. She's really embarrassed. So she kind of like runs away for a bit because her dad hosts a really lame party and she has to speak to her dad and be like, Dad, I'm not a kid anymore. Stop doing that. Meanwhile, Zane employs Lewis to help him find the sea monster. And Lewis is like, maybe I can sabotage Zane and lead him away from Mako Island and stuff. So I'll throw him off the scent of the girls. So basically, when Cleo is running away from the party, she goes to Mako Island. And when she goes to Mako Island, Lewis and Zane are like nearby on a boat and they have this like fish scanner. And when Cleo swims underwater, they catch vibrations of her swimming under the water. And Zane's like, oh my God, we found the monster. And Cleo nearly gets caught. Next episode, Emma gets a job in the Juice Knit Cafe. She loves it. She loves the power. But then Ricky is complaining about not having any money. And Cleo's like, oh, why don't you just like hire her? So Emma reluctantly hires her and they really clash at work, and eventually Emma fires her, but then they make up again at the end of the episode. Also, I think it's important to note in this episode, we sense a little bit of a vibe between Zane and Ricky. So Zane is out on a kind of date with Miriam or whatever, and then Ricky and Zane have kind of like a bantery type interaction, and Zane thinks she's funny. Miriam gets mad about this, and she's like, I'm going to sabotage them at work. So Miriam goes into the freezer at the Juice Knit Cafe, and she decides to like leave it open so all the food will be like thawed and like destroy all the food. But then Emma walks into the freezer when Miriam is in there. Miriam quickly hides behind a shelf, and Emma's like, shit, all the food is like unfrosting. So she quickly does a freeze with her powers, not knowing that Miriam's there. The next day, they go to the Juice Knit Cafe, and Emma finds Miriam completely frozen in the freezer. So the rest of the episode, the girls are basically trying to defrost Miriam, and it's actually quite scary because Miriam could actually die from it. It's really not good, but they save her. So basically this episode is very sinister vibes. So now I'm going to do a brief recap of the rest of the season. Zane is basically still searching for the sea monster, and he tricks Cleo into helping him by saying he's researching animals facing extinction and that he needs access to her fishing books because her dad's a fisherman, bruv. She's like, oh, that's so sweet that you want to help the animals. And then there's this whole like confusion where their families think that they've run away together to elope. It's so, I don't know. I don't understand this episode. Basically, Zane and Cleo spend a lot of time together researching the animals. And then Harrison, Zane's dad, who's also a piece of shit, and Cleo's parents, also Bev, Cleo's mom is so annoying. They all think that they're like secretly dating and stuff. Yeah, and then Lewis finds out that about this whole thing, and he thinks they're also secretly dating, and he threatens to beat up Zane. And it's maybe the first time that we get an idea that maybe he has a crush on Cleo. The next episode is also completely mad. So basically it's pouring with rain, so the girls can't leave the house to go to school because otherwise they'll turn into mermaids. So then they all pretend that they're like feeling sick and stuff, and they use their powers on each other to give each other heat rashes and things. Emma's mum tests their temperature, and she's like, guys, you're like really sick. So then she calls this like doctor, and then the doctor's like, I've never seen a disease like this before. Next thing you know, there are people in hazmat suits turning up to Emma's house to test them, and they're like, shit, they're gonna find out we're mermaids. So everything goes completely tits up. It's all ridiculous, but they get out of the situation. Next episode is another full moon business. So Zane is still having flashbacks about the sea monster that he saw. He goes to Cleo's dad to speak to him about it so that he can try and catch it, because Cleo's dad is the fish expert because he's a fisherman. Meanwhile, the girls are having a sleepover to prepare for the full moon. Guys, I'm really struggling because I have 20,000 pages, 20,000 words of notes, and I keep like losing where I am on the page. I'm going to use my knife to point on the page. So meanwhile, the girls are having a sleepover to prepare for the full moon, and they cover all the windows in the house so that none of the moonlight will sneak in. Meanwhile, Zane dives back to the site of where Mrs. Chatham's boat crashed, and he saws off the door that was smashed in by Emma's tail as proof of the sea monster, and he shows it to all the fishermen in the area, and they're like, shit, maybe he's actually telling the truth. This is a big threat for the girls, because he is really trying to expose them without realizing that it's them. Back at Emma's house, Ricky accidentally sees some of the moonlight. It's really funny because in this show, like, the girls will see reflections of the moon in the most ridiculous way possible. They'll be like, the moon will like seep into the house, it will bounce off a doorknob, and that bounces off the water jug, and then that bounces off a fridge, and then that will bounce into Ricky's glass of water, and then she sees the reflection in her glass of water, and you're like, and it's like the most like superimposed like moon image as well. It will like, it's just so fake, and it's really brilliant. It's really funny. Ricky sees the reflection of the moonlight in her glass of water, which is just fully not possible. And Ricky gets really badly affected by the moon in this episode, and her powers start playing up, and she starts burning, and she gets really red and warm and hot for no reason. And her powers are like really out of control. This is also kind of upsetting because her face goes like quite red, but honestly, my face goes more red on like a daily basis. So it's kind of upsetting that it's painted as like a genuine medical condition when it's just how I look every day of my life. Ricky gets really upset because everything in the house is exploding and going on fire because of her powers. So she runs away to Mako Island where, surprise, surprise, Zane is going as he's looking for the sea monster. So the girls speak to Mrs. Chatham, Mrs. Louise, they speak to her for advice. And she's like, Ricky needs to go back to the moon pool so she can return to normal. So Ricky's on the island and everything that she touches is turning to fire. It's really dramatic. And she's very, very hot. At this point, she's boiling red in the face. So Zane turns up to the island. She's like sitting in this like ring of fire and he's like, what's going on? Like, what are you doing here? And they have a kind of like semi-deep chat and then they kiss. After they kiss, he immediately passes out because she's so hot. It like burns him and gives him a fever. And then she's just sitting there like, shit. Romance. So the next day, the girls sneak over to Mako Island. By the girls, I mean Emma and Cleo, and they've got like shades on because the moonlight is still up and they don't want to see anyone. And we get this really funny screenshot where they're like walking like this, which is very much me vibes, leaving a sleepover when I look completely busted. So they find Ricky and they're like, you can't run away again. Like, we've just got to stick together, babe. Ricky's like, no, I'm a lone wolf. I should be alone because I'm dangerous. And she's being really dramatic. So they take Ricky back to the moon pool. They return her to normal. At first it doesn't work, but then it does. Emma gets grounded because the house is in a mess after Ricky trashed it. And they think that Emma had a party. Then the next day, this is really funny. Ricky sees Zane at the Zeus. Ricky sees Zane at the Gooseneck Cafe and she like puts her sunglasses on and she's like, you don't see me, you don't see me. And he's like, bruv, I literally got a fever from kissing you. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't remember being at Mako. Who, me? And he's like, well, whatever it is, it must have been a great kiss. And she's like, she doesn't remember anything about kissing him. So she's traumatized. So in the next few episodes, there's a few minor and major plot points. Minor plot points include we see Cleo's annoying cousin Angela who doesn't get a photo because fuck her, and it makes Cleo realize that Kim isn't so bad after all. Then at 24:53, they are drinking what looks like Ribena and lime cordial out of milkshake glasses. Just lock this man up. Emma and Cleo help Lewis win this big fishing competition and he's really mad because then everyone thinks he's cheated. Then Ricky and Zane end up going to the same art conference in this like fancy hotel. And they end up going out on this like hotel balcony for a chat and then the door's locked. And then the door's locked and they're trapped. But then the doors lock and they're trapped on the balcony and there are grey clouds in the sky. So it's about to rain and Ricky's like, shit, I need to get inside. Otherwise I'm going to have a huge flopping tail on the balcony and he's going to see me. They kind of argue a bit and have some chemistry and then they kiss again. But this time Ricky remembers it. Zane thinks Mrs. Chatham knows something about the sea monster. So in this episode also, Emma dyes her hair red because she thinks that she needs a change after Byron says to her that she's predictable and she freaks out about it and dyes her hair.
Emma!
Byron, hey!
Knew it was you. Saw you from back there and I thought, Emma.
Zane is getting closer to Ricky, not realizing that she's a mermaid. Mrs. Chatham tells the girls to be careful about who they date and share their secret with, and she looks at Ricky really intensely like she knows about her and Zane, and at this point, she's kind of stalking Ricky, like she keeps following her and Zane around and spying on her. Then Zane asks Emma about that night when she found him on the beach after being attacked by the sea monster, and she's like, literally leave it alone, like forget about it, it's so annoying. He dives back to the boat, and when he dives back to the boat, he sees a mermaid. But he sees a mermaid with red hair because it's Emma when she has red hair. Side note as well, because she dyes her hair when she's in mermaid form, her red hair only stays with her when she's in mermaid form. So when she's a human, she just has blonde hair. So Emma's swimming around by the boat. Zane sees a mermaid with red hair. He doesn't realize it's Emma because the red hair. So at the end of the episode, the girls are all hanging out and they're like, oh, we're always going to share everything with each other, right? And Ricky's being all shady and she's like, yeah, definitely. But she still hasn't told them about her and Zane and the fact that they've been kissing and hanging out. So now we're in the last 5 episodes of season 1. So in the start of episode 22, Cleo and Emma see Ricky and Zane on a date at the movies. So now their relationship is exposed. So Cleo and Emma are going back and forth about it, trying to figure out how to ask Ricky about Zane. And they're very concerned because Zane is a piece of shit, remember? So Zane and Ricky are out and they see this really nice red dress in the shops and Ricky's like, oh my God, I love it. And then Zane secretly buys it for her. So the girls asked to meet Ricky at the moon pool and they confront Ricky about it. And she's like, oh, you guys are being so dramatic and ridiculous. And they're like, no, we're not. And they give Ricky an ultimatum. It's either them or him. Dun dun dun. Meanwhile, Zayn's dad, who's an even bigger piece of shit, is trying to sort out this deal where he buys Mako Island and develops like a theme park and a hotel on it. So Zayn's dad is hosting this big meeting, kind of dinner thing. And Zayn surprises Ricky with the red dress and he's like, I'd really like you to come to this dinner with me and my dad and like his business partners and stuff. Also, weirdly, Emma's dad is like a part of this business deal. So I'm guessing her dad is like quite rich and successful, which makes him even more of a DILF. Hello, Neil. Ricky turns up to the dinner and we get this slow-mo shot of her going to the dinner in the red dress, and it's kind of like Hermione Granger at the Yule Ball kind of vibes. Her and Zayn come across like a really bitchy kind of couple. It's really annoying. At the dinner, Ricky ruins the deal because she argues with Zayn's dad that the island should be protected and all the wildlife will be destroyed if he builds on it, and he's absolutely fuming. Ricky gets in an argument with Zayn about it and then leaves the dinner. Meanwhile, Cleo is clearing out her wardrobe with Louis. Then Ricky has an emo moment at the moon pool and we get this montage of Ricky remembering all the good memories of her being a fish, and then she goes back to the dinner and convinces Zayn to side with her, and then her, Zayn and Emma like leave the dinner and they're like, bam, fuck your deal. Then Emma apologizes to Ricky and they all make up. In the next episode, Zayn and Ricky are being cute together. Ricky passes this shop where she sees the third necklace from the set in this antique store, and she's like, oh my god, I must have that necklace, but she doesn't have any money to buy it. They look at the necklace and she's like, oh, I really, really want it. And then we find out that Miriam is spying on them. She finds out that Ricky wants the necklace and she buys it just to spite her because she's nasty. She's a nasty gal. They speak to Mrs. Chatham more about her past and we get this lovely screenshot. This is where this picture comes from, 2842 in episode 23, I think. And Mrs. Chatham tells them about the original three mermaids, and she says about how like the original three mermaids kind of like boys always got in the way of them and stuff. Then Ricky sees Miriam wearing the necklace in the Juice Net Cafe and they have a fight. Like they have a proper bust up in the Juice Net Cafe and Ricky's fucking fuming. So Ricky and Zayn have a fight about the necklace as well. And Zayn is like, why is this necklace so important to you? And she's like, it doesn't matter. And he's like, babe, you literally nearly tore Miriam apart. So clearly it means something to you. And I think at this point, it kind of hits Ricky that she can't really be in relationships because she can't tell them the truth about her affliction. Then they speak to Mrs. Chatham again. She tells them more about the boys that drove apart the original mermaids and that they should be careful. And she kind of implies that Ricky is going to do the same thing. Also in the flashbacks, there's this like really awful color grading. I don't want to talk about it. So Zayn speaks to Miriam and he's like, give the necklace back. And she's like, I'll give it to you for a kiss. Zayn is like, okay, you're dumb, but he reluctantly kisses her, and Miriam plans the whole thing so that Miriam plans the whole thing so that Ricky will walk in and see them kissing. So it also kills me because in the background of all these scenes, the same music is just playing, because in the Juice Net Cafe, there's always the same music playing. So there's this really cutting moment where Ricky is seeing someone that she has a big fat crush on kissing another girl, and the music is just like, Miriam is like, Sike, I said I'd give you back the necklace, but I didn't say how. And then she throws the necklace into the ocean. So Emma secretly dives into the ocean to get the necklace, but then Zayn dives in to get the necklace too. And he nearly sees her, but then he doesn't. And he gets the necklace for Ricky. And then he like holds it out for her and it's like dripping wet. So she quickly like heats it up without him seeing, and then she puts it on. So now all three girls have one of the special mermaid lockets. So that's what the locket looks like. That's a good picture of it. It's like this antique kind of silver necklace thing. So in the next episode, not much happens except there's a school dance that the girls really want to go to, but they don't want to risk getting wet. So Louis creates this special like water repellent spray. So if you spray this spray on you, it means that it will repel water. So in theory, if the girls get wet, they won't turn into mermaids. So the girls all get dressed up for the ball, and each of them goes with their respective season 1 love interests. So Emma goes with Byron, Ricky goes with Zayn, and Cleo goes with Nate, which we don't talk about because I don't have a fucking picture of him. I'm fucking fuming. Basically, there's this whole shit about like Cleo wants Louis to ask her to the ball, but Louis is completely clueless and he doesn't pick up on any of her hints, so he doesn't ask her. So then Cleo's like, okay, guess I go with the other person who asked me, and Nate asks her. Also, we get this horrendous moment of Nate saying to Cleo, oh, wear something short and tight, and she's like, Jesus Christ. The boys in this town are just chilling. It chills me to my core. Also, let's not talk about Chloe. I keep calling her Chloe. Let's not talk about Cleo's hairstyle. Truly shocked me to my core. So Cleo and Lewis have a chat before the ball, and Lewis realizes that he fucked up, and he starts to ask Cleo out on a date, but then Nate arrives up at the house. And then in front of Cleo's dad, he says, oh, I thought I asked you to wear something short and tight. And her dad is like, what? Mr. Satori speaks to Lewis and he's like, don't let her go with this buffoon. You should go after her and try and win her back. So then Lewis turns up to the ball trying to win Cleo over, and we get some great dancing scenes of them dancing in a super awkward way. But then the girls have allergic reactions to the spray that Lewis made, and they get this weird red rash. So their faces are all red and they're all embarrassed because their faces are so red, which is just me every single day of my life. It's really hitting close to home. The girls are all depressed and they're like, oh, Lewis, you ruined our night. We look like ugly little rats. So then they all like leave the ball and they head to the moon pool to kind of like cool off and stuff. So then their dates are waiting at the ball after being abandoned by all the girls. And then Lewis goes and speaks to Mrs. Chatham for advice. She's basically like, oh, like you can't interfere with magic. Like your science can't help. And he's like, no, science is everything. And she's like, no, it's not. Magic is everything. Also at this point, Miss Chatham's really starting to play on my nerves. She's just kind of like always poking her nose in their business. And it's like, why are you friends with them? Like these are literal 16-year-olds and she's just like hanging out with them all the time. And I get it, like respect your elders, like talk to your elders, but you don't need to just like hang out every single day. It's a bit overkill. Lewis speaks to Mrs. Chatham for advice and then he heads to the moon pool and he tells Ricky, he's like, oh, Ricky, Zane's still waiting for you at the ball. And she's like, no way. So she dives into the moon pool and heads back to the ball. And then Emma's like, oh, I suppose that Byron's not there. And then he's like, no, he is. And then she flops into the water and swims away. And then it's just Lewis and Cleo left together. And they have a deep chat by the moon pool. And she's like, I really want to go to the ball with you. And then they kiss. No, I'm really happy for them. I really am. But it's a very cringe moment. Now, we're on the final 2 episodes of the first season. So let's just get through this and then I can have a break. So the big baddie of the season, threat level midnight, Dr. Denman, she's back and she's wreaking absolute havoc in their lives, bruv. So at the start of the episode, Cleo and Lewis are in love and they're swimming together and they're at the moon pool and they're drawing hearts in the sand. It's all very, very cute. Meanwhile, Emma hears about her family holiday to the swimming resort that they go to apparently every year. And she's like, sorry, I can't go. And her parents are like, what? We literally go there every summer. And she's like, sorry, bro, can't do it. Can't do it. Yeah. Lewis goes and pays Dr. Denman a visit. And she says that she's just doing regular, boring old research and stuff. And then the girls like go and talk about it in the Gooseneck Cafe. And Charles? And Lewis is like, don't worry, there's nothing to worry about. She's just doing boring, regular old research. Then Zane overhears them and he's like, what's this about a marine biologist? Because in his head, he hears marine biologist, he just thinks sea monster because that's all he thinks about. He's got a one-track mind. We just see sea monster flashing in his eyes. So he goes to see Dr. Denman and he's wearing a criminal t-shirt in his outfit. And he tells her that he believes in mermaids and she's like, they don't exist, okay? And he's like, trust me, they do. Keep searching Mako Island. And she's like, So all the marine biologists, her and her crew, they go out to Mako Island and they plant these secret underwater cameras by the entrance to the moon pool, the underwater cave entrance to the moon pool. And they also see a little love heart that's been drawn in the sand in the cave. And next to the love heart is a scale, one of Cleo's mermaid scales. Dun, dun, dun. So Dr. Denman is confounded because it's something that she's never seen before. So she takes it and she tests it and realizes it's the same scale that Lewis had earlier on in the season, where you add water to the scale and it turns to water. And when you add water to the scale, it turns to normal human skin. Meanwhile, Elliot is upset because he thinks that Emma's like ruining the family by not going on holiday. And he thinks that she's just like doing it for fun. So meanwhile, the gang are at the Gooseneck Cafe. Lewis and Cleo are being all cutesy and drawing salt on the table into shapes of love hearts. And then Dr. Denman walks in and she speaks to Lewis and she's like, bruv, I literally found the sample that you were hiding from me earlier on. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Straight up, don't know what you're talking about, chatting shit. But you can see that he's starting to sweat a bit and then she's leaving the Gooseneck Cafe. She sees the salt drawn into a love heart on the table and she puts 2 and 2 together because the love heart in the salt looks the same as the love heart in the sand. And she's like, shit, maybe Lewis knows more than he's letting on and maybe these girls are involved. Also in this episode, they're drinking orange squash with pink straws and a bowl of crisps. So Ricky speaks to Zane And she's like, stop obsessing about this mermaid thing. And he's like, no, you're just like my dad. You don't believe in me. And then they argue. Then the girls go to make her for a swim. But at the same time, Zane and his dad, Harrison, they visit Dr. Denman's boat. We realise that Zane's dad is working with Dr. Denman to do tests on Mako Island so he can build his hotel there. They're all on the boat, and then the CCTV monitors start beeping, and then the underwater cameras capture the girls as they're swimming in mermaid form. Zane goes over to the monitor and he sees this picture of some mermaids, and he's like, see, I told you, mermaids do exist. The monitor starts beeping again, and Zane doesn't see this picture, so he doesn't realise. But in this picture, you can see all the girls' faces in the picture. And Harrison's like, oh my God, I know who these girls are. So that's leading us onto the season finale. Basically, at the end of this episode, Zane knows that there are mermaids that exist, but he doesn't know the mermaids are Emma, Cleo, and Ricky. Harrison knows the mermaids are Emma, Cleo, and Ricky, and so does Dr. Denman. So the girls are in trouble. Season finale, we start by learning that there's a full moon coming, and this one is very special. So it's a lunar eclipse, and apparently it has a different effect on mermaids. So when they're chatting, the girls don't realise that they're being papped by one of the biologists, and someone from Dr. Denman's team is like taking pictures of them. So Zane sees Ricky and he's like, oh my God, the biologist found pictures of mermaids. And Ricky's like, what the fuck? So she tells the girls and they're all very worried. And then Dr. Denman calls Lewis to the boat for a chat. She quizzes him about the cell sample and he just like denies everything. But then she shows a picture to him of the girls in mermaid form and he's like, it's clearly a fake. So she's like, shut up, you know it's not. I know that you know that these girls are mermaids and they could be worth a fortune. Which is also kind of funny thinking about it because it's like, really? You're just going to sell a couple of teenage girls? Like, to who? The evil guys working for Dr. Denman's boat, they steal Lewis's phone and text the girls from his phone saying to meet him at the moon pool, and then they lock him up in the basement of the boat. So Lewis is trapped. So the girls head to the moon pool not realizing that it's a trap. They get there and someone puts gates over the entrance to the cave and locks them in without them realizing. So they're in the moon pool and then Dr. Denman walks in and is like, glad you could come, girls. So the girls try to leave the moon pool, but then realise that they're trapped in because it's got bloody bars on it. So Dr. Denman's like, oi, I just want to talk to you guys. I just want to have a chat. But the girls are very scared, so they try and use their powers on her, but it doesn't really have the effect that they were going for, and it's a bit kind of pathetic and sad. So then Zane enters the cave, and he's like, shit, that's my girlfriend. She's a fucking mermaid. She's an absolute fucking mermaid. So the next thing you know, the biologists from Dr. Denman's team are setting up camp in the cave. Why can I not speak today? So next thing you know, Dr. Denman is setting up tests in the cave with her team so she can like test the girls and stuff. But then Zane goes over to Ricky and he's like trying to talk to her and he's like, oh my God, you're a mermaid. And she's like, yeah, look what you've done. And he's like, can we just talk? And she's like, no, you've done enough. The best thing you can do is get us out of this flopping mess. So Zane goes back to Dr. Denman's boat and tries to speak to Lewis. And he's like, Lewis, I've really messed up. And Lewis is like, yeah, if there was a stating the obvious Olympics, you'd win a gold medal. That's a quote. Lewis and Zane team up to go and help the girls. They go to the moon pool at Mako Island on Lewis's boat, and Lewis secretly dives under the water, attaches these clamps to the bars of the cave, and then plans to like rip them off so that the girls can escape. So Zane goes back into the moon pool area. He speaks to Ricky and he's like, get ready to escape. And Ricky's like, this better not be a freaking prank. And he's like, no, when I give you the signal, get out of here. So Lewis pulls the bars off the cave and Dr. Denman is like, what was that noise? Because it sounds like an explosion. And then Ricky's like, that was the sound of goodbye. And then the girls all leave the cave. So Zane gets in loads of trouble from his dad, but Zane finally stands up to him and he's like, Zane is like, when did you become such a piece of shit? And his dad is like, do you have any idea of what you've lost us? And then Zane is like, yeah, I'll tell you what you've lost us. You've lost me. Boom. Yeah. So then the girls speak to Mrs. Chatham and they're like, what do we do? And she's like, well, you can give up your powers tonight at the lunar eclipse. If you go to the pool, it will take away all your powers. And the girls are like, no way, there's no way we've gone through all of this for nothing. But it kind of seems like their best bet if they're not going to end up like sushi. Zane's dad tells Denman that he's pulling out of the deal, but then the fish camera monitor starts beeping again and they're all like, shit, the girls are back at Mako. So they all start heading back to Mako Island. So the girls are at Mako Island and they have a really emotional moment at the pool as they're about to give up their powers. And then they look at the pool and it starts bubbling, so they think they can jump in. But then the water isn't bubbling, it's just Dr. Denman coming out of the water. So the girls manage to attack some of the marine biologists with their powers by like freezing the water in their suits and stuff. And then they're about to attack Dr. Denman, and she's like, wait, let's just talk. And she's like, I can give you an offer. And the girls are like, no, it's too late. And then they tell her that they're giving up their powers. And she's like, why would you do that? And they're like, because of stupid people like you bloody idiot. So the girls get into the pool, the moon rises up, the water starts bubbling and sparkles come up, and then it takes away all their powers. And then Dr. Denman's just like watching, they're like, shit, there goes my retirement fund. So the girls are now in the moon pool, and they have their flopping tails gone, and they've just got normal, boring human legs. So then they all get out of the pool really solemnly, and they're like, now look what you've done. Boring old humans again. Cut to Zane and Ricky chatting on the beach. And she's like, yeah, I'm not a mermaid anymore. And he's sad about it, but he's like, maybe it's for the best. And then he tells Ricky that he's like getting along better with his dad again. And then his dad like pulls up in a car, and he literally looks like a completely different person. Like for the whole show, he's always got a face like that. He looks really triggered and upset. And then he pulls up in his car and he's like grinning like he's Buddy the Elf or something. So now he's a good dad. Then Ricky decides to go for a pensive walk at the beach. But when her feet touch the water, something weird happens. She's still a mermaid. Emma goes for a swim in her swimming pool. She's also still a mermaid. Cleo has a bath, which is flashback to season 1, episode 1, and she's also still friggin' mermaid. So all the girls meet at Emma's house and they're like, what the fuck? And then Lewis is like, yeah, I knew all along, because basically the lunar eclipse only draws away your powers for 12 hours, but he didn't want to tell them because they had to believe they'd lose their powers for Dr. Denman to believe it. So all the girls are like kind of like pissed off at Lewis, which I don't really get because it's like he helps them, but they're pissed off at him. So they prank Lewis by like hovering him above the swimming pool as like a prank and a punishment. And they're like, yeah, no one messes with the mermaids. And that is the end of season 1. So long story short, I'm really tired and my voice is cracking. I need to go and have a coffee. But basically, let's do a quick recap of season 1. So I feel like season 1 is a bit more childish and young, and there are some great iconic scenes, but I feel like the characters really go into themselves in like season 2. So quick rundown of each category of analysis for season 1. So 1, the girls are all mermaids. Dr. Denman is a big threat in this season, but she is cancelled by the end. Miriam is also a threat, but not in a life-threatening way. Nate is annoying in the season, but he gets worse, trust me. Zane starts out as a piece of shit, but he ends up a tiny little bit better. His dad is also a piece of shit. We meet all the girls' parents. Emma's mum is a legend. Her dad is fit and her brother is fine, but he has bad taste in girls. Cleo's parents, her dad is a legend. Her mum is so annoying, I hate her. Kim is annoying but iconic. We don't meet any of Ricky's family yet. That comes in season 2. Emma kind of has a thing with Byron, but that doesn't really go anywhere. And by the end of season 1, Ricky and Zane are not really together, but like we never really see them break up. Like we assume that they broke up when he like got them like nearly killed, because that would kind of end a relationship. And by the end of season 1, Cleo and Lewis are finally together. So Lewis and Cleo are kind of like the will they won't they, Ross and Rachel of the show. The Juice Net Cafe, however, has been the biggest villain of the whole season. I don't know what's on their menu, but the girls are truly being scammed with their cranberry juice orders that they have nearly every single day. So with all that being said, it's time for season 2. So, welcome to season 2 of H20, Just Add Water. I have more coffee and I'm ready to go. So, I've got my knife. This is the state of the board for season 2. So for season 1, all the interactions between the characters were with blue string, blue for the water. For season 2, I have black and white string. Note how much effort I went to for the one interaction that Annette has with Cleo's dad, Donald. Yeah, we have a bunch of new characters this season. We have Ash, we have Charlotte, we have Annette, Gracie, Max Hamilton, Terry Chadwick, and Frozen Cleo. More on that later. A lot of stuff is going to go down in season 2, which is my favourite season of the whole show, so I'm very, very excited. Oh yeah, I kind of brushed over this, but I put Lewis's boat as a character of its own because there's some discourse around the boat that I want to get into while we're talking about season 2. So season 1 recap, we've just had that. Basically, all the girls are mermaids. Dr. Denman was a big threat, but then she leaves. Miriam was kind of a threat, but like not really. Louise Chatham was there. And there was a bunch of shit with Zayn thinking that he'd seen a sea monster, and then the girls were nearly exposed, but then they weren't. So it's all fine. So season 2, everything gets a little bit more intense. The threats are more real, it's darker, the love interests are better. It just feels more like everything's kind of aged up with the girls. It feels more realistic. It's my favorite from the whole show. The season opening is just fantastic. I remember watching that as a kid and it had me absolutely quaking in my boots. So the season starts with a gorgeous swimming montage, and we see a bit of banter from the girls as they joke about who's the fastest, who's the slowest swimmer, all that kind of stuff. Then the girls go to the Juice Net Cafe, and there's this whole bit about how the hot chocolate isn't really hot and they should just call it lukewarm chocolate on the menu. But then Ricky uses her powers to heat it up, and then Lewis walks in and he's like, guys, should you really be doing that in public? Also, Cleo is drinking hot chocolate with a pink straw. Emma has a cranberry juice with a yellow straw. Lewis has come up with a new program that allows him to track the moon, and he says that they can work together to not be affected by the moon's powers because there's going to be a full moon that night in typical H20 fashion. They're preparing for the full moon, which is apparently going to be a really strong one. Bear that in mind. There's this whole thing about Kim needing to go to a concert and she's trying to steal Cleo's clothes, and we find out that Cleo's parents have split up over the summer. So, sorry Bev. They have now split ties. Oh no, I'm worried my landlord is gonna see this and be like, what the fuck are you doing to my wall? So Bev is no more, and thank fuck, because I hated her character. She was clingy and annoying. But sad for Cleo, her parents have split up. The family is going through a bit of kind of collective trauma as they readjust. Yeah, Clem's acting out and she's doing the whole like, you're not my mum bit to Cleo because Cleo's like kind of like telling her what to do. And we're sensing a bit of family trauma with Cleo this season. She's a bit angsty. She's a little bit darker. So she's kind of like matured a bit. The girls decide to have a sleepover at Emma's house to avoid the moon. And we get some menacing shots of the moon pool as it's like bubbling away with the moon rising up over the cave. But at Emma's house, someone leaves the front door open, and at 8:20, they all get moonstruck because Lewis realizes that his super high-tech program was in a different time zone, babe. So the moon has risen earlier than he said it would because it's a Korean software, so it's in Korean time zone. Lewis is like, shit, fucked up again, and it's only episode 1. So the girls leave the house and they jump into the ocean and head to Mako Island, and Lewis goes after them on his boat. So let's get into the boat. So the mileage on this tiny little boat, I mean, he's constantly zipping back and forth between Mako Island and the mainland. So I just want to know how much he's spending on gas, petrol, diesel, whatever, whether it's a rechargeable boat. These people all seem to have like disposable income, or like they can just spend money on unlimited drinks or unlimited fuel for their boats, because Lewis's boat makes quite a big, you know, scene in the show. They're constantly using it to rescue people when they're in danger. So shout out to Lewis's boat. It was doing the most in the show. It was doing a lot. So the girls go to the moon pool at Mako Island, and the moon rises over the cave, and we assume that this is going to be really bad news because bad things always happen to the girls when they're in the moon pool at moon time. Lewis gets to the cave and he's like, are you guys okay? And they're all acting kind of possessed and like really, really weird, and they're speaking kind of robotically, and he's like, let me take you home. And they're like, we are home, Lewis. And then they all band together and they attack him with their powers. And their powers are really, really strong, and they can control the weather and stuff. And they send Lewis flying up in the air through the cave, and we get this really weird CGI shot. But it's really sad to see because Lewis is trying to help them, and then they attack him. So the girls wake up the next day with absolutely no memory of what happened, and they're still in the clothes from the night before. Cleo goes downstairs and her dad's like, you need to take Kim to our concert today, and Kim's being really annoying about it. So Cleo decides to use her powers on her to do a little prank on her. But then when she does this, there's a massive gust of wind and her powers are really strong and she nearly hurts Kim. Same thing for Emma. Elliot, little menace, he left the freezer door open and all the food is defrosting. So she does a quick freeze of the food, but then she accidentally freezes the entire kitchen. Same with Ricky. She sees her clothes on the clothesline and the clothes are wet, dripping wet, and she needs to put her jeans on. So she uses her powers to heat up the jeans, and then they set on friggin' fire. The girls meet up at the Juice Net Cafe and they're like, what even happened last night? Like, they don't remember anything. So Cleo checks her phone and there's a message from Lewis, and he's basically like saying that they were moonstruck and he's like sorry and all this kind of stuff, and they're like, shit. There's a news report on the TV in the cafe that says there was a freak weather accident on Mako Island and local meteorologists are puzzled because they don't know what happened. And the only thing they recovered was a battered boat. So they go and check the docks and they see that Lewis's boat is not there. Oh, also forgot to mention the girls are drinking cranberry and apple juice again. So they go and check the docks and his boat isn't there. And Cleo is like, I think he came after us at Mako Island and like something bad happened, so we should go there. Meanwhile, back at the house, Kim is waiting for Cleo to take her to the concert, but Cleo doesn't turn up, so Kim steals one of Kim's top and goes to the concert by herself. So the girls go to Mako Island and they find Lewis's torch on the beach, and Cleo's like, no, he would never leave this alone, like I gave it to him last Christmas. So they all like look around and then they're like, hear this weird noise, it's like this whimpering sound from the rocks, and they're like, hold on. And then they see Lewis hiding in the rocks and he's like, please don't hurt me again. And he's like cowering in the rocks and he's like terrified of them. He's traumatized. Yeah, and it's actually very upsetting because they've kind of messed him up and he's like really upset about it. So the girls are all very puzzled about their sudden freak powers and they don't really know what to do about it. So in episode 2, the girls are out of control with their powers. And in the beginning of the episode, we meet Charlotte. Now, Charlotte is a very, very big character this season. To describe her in a few words, she's a bit desperate, smart, manipulative, and a bit insecure. She also has red hair and she sometimes does painting. So Cleo meets Charlotte at school because Cleo accidentally turns on the sprinklers and gets Charlotte wet, and she goes over to her. She's like, I'm so sorry. And Charlotte's like, it's not your fault. And then Cleo's like, oh yeah, totally not my fault. And then Lewis comes over, and as soon as Lewis meets Charlotte, it's like Charlotte has got like heart eyes. I just nearly cut my eye out. Yeah, she sees him and she's like, hey. Even though it's clear that Lewis and Cleo are a couple and they're very cute at this point. Yeah, and we get a really cute moment of them together at 2:20. All I feel is pain. At 2:44, they're drinking guava juice with plain Doritos. Bland, boring, unoriginal, but it is better than Robinson's discounted squash. So at this point, there's a bit of friction between Cleo and Lewis because he's being very protective of her after her freak powers incident, and she's feeling a bit smothered and like she needs some space. So they all meet at the moon pool and they do some tests on their new powers to figure out how strong they are and whether they can control them, because at the moment they're completely out of control. They're completely out of control, bruv. So they do some tests and they're all still out of control, and Cleo snaps at Lewis because he keeps trying to help her and she's like, please stop, like you're smothering me. Meanwhile, Emma uses her powers to help her brother Elliot win a football game because Nate's little brother keeps bullying him and pushing him over. Still don't have a picture of Nate, I'm very upset. Then Lewis turns up at Cleo's work at the marine park and he tries to help her do her job because he's worried that she's like working too hard or whatever. And then she speaks to the girls and she's like, bruv, he's driving me completely mad. And Ricky's like, just break up with him. And Cleo's like, Then at 1909, Cleo and Lewis break up. And he is crestfallen and we get this really sad screenshot of him. Then we have a depression montage of Cleo. And this song playing in this montage is really big this season because whenever the girls have any kind of negative emotion, they just shove the song on and they show the girls like swimming with the turtles and stuff. Shout out to the person that did the original songs for the show. Hope you're doing well. So at 22:02, Charlotte and Lewis have another interaction where she's very overly flirty with him and she gives him a drawing that she did of Lewis. And Lewis is drinking, and I can't quite believe I'm saying this, what looks like mango juice with bits of lettuce in it. This place should be shut down. So the girls practice controlling their powers by doing these Japanese drawings that Charlotte is seen doing, and then they control their powers a bit more, so that's a win. So in the next episode, Zane is back in town and he thinks that Ricky isn't a mermaid anymore, but he's still in love with her and trying to win her back. Meanwhile, Lewis is spending a lot of nerd time with Charlotte and Cleo is getting very jealous. Zane is trying to impress Ricky on his motorbike. Then at 4:24, this song is playing that becomes the kind of slay song for the season. So whenever they're doing something empowering or sassy, they play this song. So Cleo is being kind of toxic and spying on Charlotte and Lewis. Zane tricks Ricky into kissing her by pretending he's dead, and she has to give him mouth to mouth. Yep. Then Cleo convinces herself that Charlotte has a boyfriend and she tries to expose her. But then Charlotte's like, no, I don't have a boyfriend. I'm just performing in the play of Romeo and Juliet. And that's where there's a picture of me kissing someone on the cover of a leaflet because it's a leaflet for a play. And Cleo's like, shit, okay, that makes sense. Then Ricky sees Zane by the docks and she gets splashed by a boat. And then he finds out that she's still a mermaid because she has to jump into the water so no one will see her. Leo and Clueless. That's their ship name, Clueless. All right, yeah, Clueless. Cleo and Lewis have a deep talk and they're like, we can still be friends. And he's like, yeah, but if you ever change your mind and want to date me again, then just let me know. Also, I really like the framing of this shot because there's a little tub of ice cream right in between them, which is just brilliant. Also, Zane and Ricky are officially back together. So the next episode, I just cannot talk. The next episode is kind of random because basically Emma's parents are out of town. So Ricky goes and stays with her for the weekend and they kind of clash because Ricky's very carefree and messy and Emma is so uptight and neat. And then Emma starts to feel jealous because her brother Elliot thinks that Ricky is cooler than her. So Emma decides that she could be a rebel too, and she throws a massive bitchin' party. Also important to note, Emma's parents are away because they're at a crystal convention, yes, and they have this new piece they're really proud of, and then at the party someone breaks it. There's also a situation of toxic masculinity, and Nate convinces Lewis that Cleo doesn't like him because he's not manly enough, and then they do martial arts together. But secretly, Nate, he's not on the board, but I'm pointing where he would be. Nate is actually just trying to sabotage Lewis so he can try and date Cleo, and he sends her flowers and like anonymous gifts and stuff. And then when Cleo finds out, she's like, no, I would never date you, you're disgusting. So this is just another classic example of Nate being desperate and horny all the time, and he really just has no self-respect and he's completely delusional. At the end of the episode, Ricky tries to take the blame for Emma's party, but then Emma tells her parents like it wasn't Ricky that threw the party, it was me, she's just lying to protect me, and then Emma learns her lesson to just be herself, you know? Cleo speaks to Lewis and she's like, I didn't break up with you because you weren't manly enough, like you're great as you are. You sense a bit of a vibe between them, but it's kind of brushed over. So to summarize the next episode, the Satori house isn't doing too well because Donald is struggling without their mum there. Then Lewis finds this really weird, rare book about mermaids and there's like spells and shit. And then Cleo sees this one about wish giving and she's like, it's giving me ideas. So Winfred speaks to Emma about shooting a commercial for the Gooseneck Cafe because business isn't doing too well. I wonder why, Winfred. Maybe because you're serving Ribena in plastic cups. Cleo gets some rare algae for the magic wish-giving spell, which is like a key ingredient, and Charlotte gets suspicious about Lewis spending lots of time with Cleo and carrying this book around. And she's like, oh, lol, it's not like I was spying on you or anything. So the girls are in the cafe making a potion and it apparently doesn't work. And Ricky's like, see, I told you so. But then at the end, Ricky gives it a little zap of her powers for fun and then we see it like bubbling and stuff. Later on, Cleo is in the bath in mermaid form and she puts some of the potion on her cheek because that's how you use it. You put it on your cheek and then you grant the wish and then it disappears. She puts it on her cheek and it works and she grants the wish. So she's absolutely buzzing about this. But Emma goes to work and finds that the potion, which was already disgusting and green to begin with, has now bubbled and expanded everywhere and the entire cafe is like covered in this green goo. So Emma is fuming because the cafe's a mess and Cleo speaks to her dad and she's like, oh, what would you wish for? And then he's like trying to fix this like broken fish scanner he has, but Cleo is thinking that if he makes a wish, he'll wish for like their family to like get back together again, which is kind of sad. So Ricky and Emma and Lewis are at the Gooseneck Cafe trying to get rid of this goo, but it's like getting bigger and bigger. So Wilfred then turns up at the cafe with the film crew to shoot his commercial, and she's like, soz, you can't go inside, like, but I can't tell you why. And she encourages him to like film the commercial outside. So Cleo goes to the cafe and they realize that they need to wish for the goo to go away, but if they do that, they can't make any more wishes. So Cleo and Lewis have like a really deep talk where she's like, oh, don't you wish things could go back to normal? And he's like, there's no time for that. Like, no time for that, babe. Like, Wilfred is just outside trying to get in. The place is a mess and you've got a flopping tail. So they wish for the goo to go away and then everything's all good. Cleo finds out that her dad didn't wish for him to get back together with her mum and he wished for a fish scanner. And she's like, oh. And then her dad is like, yeah, your mum and I aren't getting back together. And she's like, ew. Coffee break. And it's cold again. So in the next episode, not much happens, but basically Cleo thinks that her dad, Donald, is dating Charlotte's mum, Annette Watsford. Cleo's kind of traumatized about it. And then Lewis figures out that Charlotte has a crush on him, which isn't difficult to do because she's so obvious about it and not at all cool. So they both go on like a fishing date, and then Lewis puts a plaster in her finger and Charlotte thinks it's this like really romantic moment. And then she tells him she wants to invite him to this dinner thing for her mum. And then he kind of like rejects her. It's really funny. So Cleo thinks that Charlotte and Lewis are dating and she's really, really angry. Then Charlotte goes with her mum to this dinner business thing that she has that evening. And then she realizes that it's at Cleo's house. So Cleo's like in her house expecting this woman to come around who she thinks is dating her dad. And then the woman turns up with Charlotte and she's like, wait, that's your mum? And then Charlotte's like, that's your dad? And they're all kind of like confused. As if it wasn't awkward enough, Lewis turns up to the dinner party trying to speak to Cleo. And Lewis is like, why the fuck is Charlotte here? But then Mr. Satori ends up inviting Lewis around for dinner too. And then Lewis like speaks to Cleo and he's like, there's literally nothing going on between me and Charlotte, babe. But long story short, the dinner is a disaster. They burn the fish. And at 15:39, Charlotte's mum takes a picture of Lewis and Charlotte together. Like imagine like going round to someone's house and then some random person turns up to this house and you're like, oh, let me just take a picture of you real quick. Like it's so weird. Yeah, anyway, so then Emma and Ricky turn up and they decide to prank Charlotte with their powers. And we get this wonderful line at 17:22 where Charlotte's mum says where Charlotte's mum says the fish is frozen solid, but she says it in a really weird way. Anyway, so it's just an absolutely chaotic dinner, and eventually Cleo's dad is like, no, this isn't a date, it's a business deal, because Charlotte's mum is a chef and she has a restaurant and she wanted to buy fish from Cleo's dad because he's a fisherman. And he's just like, oh, I've just lost a massive deal. And Cleo's like, ew. But the girls fix it by inviting Charlotte's mum to the Juice Net Cafe and showing him Mr. Satori's fish, and she's like, oh, okay, slay. So she ends up buying the fish from Cleo's dad. So next episode, quick summary. Basically, Cleo loses her job at the marine park because she laughs at her boss when she gets splashed by a dolphin, Ronnie, who has a character, because Ronnie is a character. Then Lewis doesn't realize that Cleo got fired and then he accidentally takes her job. So then Cleo's mad at Lewis, and then the girls try to make Lewis lose his job by pranking him at work with their powers. But then the girls come in through this underwater gate into the marine park. They accidentally leave it open and the prize-winning dolphin escapes. Dun dun dun. So Lewis nearly gets fired and then the girls have to scramble and try and find Ronnie the dolphin, and they do. In the next episode, Zane has an argument with a guy in a trailer park when Nate vandalizes a motorbike, and Zane doesn't realize that this man is Ricky's dad. Then Cleo is sad because she doesn't spend that much time with Lewis anymore since they broke up. Ricky lies to Zane about where she lives, but then later on finds out that Zane was the one who argued with her dad. Zane finds out where she lives and she's not rich, and she was like ashamed about showing him where she lives, which was really sad. But eventually Zane makes it up with her dad and explains that Nate was vandalizing his bike and not him, and he was just trying to stop him. And then Ricky invites all the girls to her house for a barbecue. In the next episode, we meet my favorite love interest from the entire series, Ash. Goddamn beautiful little man right here. Yeah, let's talk about Ash. So Ash is a horse riding instructor. He's very charming, he's very charismatic, he's funny, he's sassy, he's confident, he's hot, and he's good at riding horses. So Emma takes her brother to horse riding lessons, and straight away her and Ash have kind of like a enemies to lovers kind of vibes, and she hates like not knowing the most about something, so she pretends like she knows loads about horse riding when she doesn't. And then she embarrasses herself in front of Ash when she falls into a water trough, but she quickly runs to a barn so he doesn't see her tail. Emma accidentally, in the next horse riding lesson, lets Ash's horse eat this like poisonous plant. Emma is then ranting to her friends about Ash, and Ricky and Cleo are like, ooh, it sounds like you have a crush on him. And she's like, ew, no, he literally makes me sick. But then he comes round to Emma's house and like surprises her because he has like a certificate to give to Elliot, but then Lisa's like, oh, why don't you just stay for lunch? So he stays for lunch, and then he's like really flirty with Emma, and the girls are like, oh my God, he's so cute. And she's like, Meanwhile, Lewis wins a science competition, and there's a bit of confusion when he accidentally invites both Charlotte and Cleo to be his date. Whilst Ash is at Emma's house for lunch, he gets a call saying his horse has been poisoned. And then Ash gets angry at Emma because she didn't listen to him, even though he's the expert, not her. But then she does some research and she like heals the horse with her like powers. So the next episode, Cleo's kind of depressed because she's failing biology. And she's sad because she's failing because she doesn't have a study partner anymore. And her study partner was Lewis. So her dad finds out and he's like, you need a tutor so you don't fail your next test. And then Charlotte turns up and she's like, oh yeah, I'm your new tutor. So Charlotte convinces Lewis to go on a picnic with her, but he's a bit preoccupied because he's expecting a call from Cleo. So Charlotte then finds these drawings that her grandmother did, and they're like drawings of Mako Island, and she tries to get Lewis to take her there. Charlotte turns up at Cleo's house to study, and she snoops in Cleo's room and takes a lot of interest in Cleo's mermaid necklace that she sees. And she like asks like why all the girls like wear the same necklace, and then Cleo gets kind of upset. Okay, so then Cleo kind of flips out about Charlotte, and she's like kind of jealous, but she's acting like she's worried about Charlotte finding out about them being mermaids. So she speaks to Lewis and she tells him her concerns, and he's like, there's no problem, but by the way, I'm taking Charlotte to Mako Island. And the girls are like, what the fuck, like don't do that. But he doesn't listen and he goes there anyway. So the girls go to Mako Island to like spy on them and make sure Charlotte doesn't find the moon pool. But Charlotte is a menace and she's ignoring Lewis. And when he tells her to stay on the beach, she goes like really near the cave entrance. Then Cleo spots them kissing and is traumatized. But Cleo gets an A on her test. Cleo and Lewis speak and he's like, oh, like it's not what you think it is between me and Charlotte. And she's like, whatever, there's nothing between us anyway. And then Lewis is like really hurt. And also you can tell Lewis is like not happy dating Charlotte, but he's like with her anyway. Anyway, in the next episode, there's a boat that crashes and it drops this rest statue into the ocean, and Zane wants to find it because there's like a big reward. Ricky finds out that she might have to move away because her dad is struggling with money. So she decides to help Zane find this like statue so she can keep the reward money and help her dad. But she doesn't tell anyone why she really needs the money. Emma and Cleo are concerned about this because they don't want Ricky to get injured while she's trying to find this statue, so they decide to help her. Meanwhile, Charlotte is being very controlling of Lewis and she keeps like blocking all his calls from the girls because she doesn't like when he spends time with them. Cleo gets upset because she thinks that Lewis doesn't care about them anymore. So Emma and Cleo leave Ricky and Zane, and then they manage to find the treasure, but when they try and pull it out of the water, it drops on Ricky's head and she gets like unconscious. So Zane calls the girls to come out and help him because she's not waking up. Lewis goes with them and Charlotte gets mad about him going to help, but he goes anyway. Then Ricky wakes up and it's all good and she's like, yeah, so basically I need the money because I might have to like move town with my dad. And they're like, why didn't you tell us? They kind of have like a party together at Ricky's house, and Lewis gives Cleo his jacket when she's cold, and it's a nice moment of him being like, oh, I'm still here for you even though we're not together. So that's that. Also, I'm getting fucking cramp in my hand from holding the knife. Like actually. This is a mess. Okay, so the next episode is iconic because it's completely ridiculous, but basically Emma finds a rare coral from the ocean and she picks it up and gives it to Cleo for her fish tank with the fish Hector. But she accidentally cuts her finger on the coral. Now we find out that the coral is very rare and kind of toxic, and it makes Emma behave really weirdly and crave seafood. It also makes Hector behave weirdly and he keeps jumping out of his tank. So Emma is being kind of feral and she goes to work and starts eating fish out the freezer, and Wilfred is like, what the fuck are you doing? Then Emma goes to the marine park and gets in one of the fish tanks and starts swimming around in full mermaid form, and this little girl sees her and she's like, oh my god, a mermaid. Then Ricky and Cleo are concerned and Cleo's fish starts turning this weird pale colour. Lewis is on a date with Charlotte at the marine park and he overhears a little girl saying that she just saw a mermaid, and Lewis is like, that doesn't sound good. So Lewis goes with Cleo and Ricky to find Emma, and they see her in this tank. And then they try and distract people from seeing the tank that Emma's in by saying that there's like a gas leak or something. So they get some sardines and they try and lure Emma out of the tank and bring her home, and they're all disgusted by how much fish she's eating. She's just being absolutely like really horrible, just disgusting, eating so much fish. Then the girls put two and two together and they realise that Emma's acting weird because of the coral, and that's what's making Hector act so weird as well, and that's what's making him sick. And then they're like, shit, if it's making Hector sick and he's about to die, then maybe it's going to make Emma die as well. So they're really worried. So Lewis and Cleo, clueless, they visit one of the marine biologists at the marine park to get an antidote to the poison that's poisoned Emma and Hector. So Emma, being a menace, she escapes from her room again and she goes back to the marine park, and this little girl sees her again, but this time Emma looks really different and she's got like white scales, she's got gills on her neck, and she's all slimy. She looks like kind of like the mermaids in the Goblet of Fire. These two, no, not those two, these two are having a date, definitely not these two. Emma's parents are having a date in the house and they buy this expensive fish food. And fish food, they buy expensive fish to eat for food. And then Emma like steals the fish and she's like eating it in her room and being all feral. So yeah, her friends break into the house while the parents are on a date. They're really confused what's going on, and they give the antidote to Emma. But when they find her in her room, she's in an absolute state, and this scene absolutely kills me every time, because we get this like, Emma's like lying in bed and we get this like slow-mo shot of her like turning around and her mouth is full of sardines and she's just disgusting. Yeah, and she's like also grunting while she's eating, so she's kind of like the pigs in Spirited Away. It's just like horrifying. So they give her the antitoxin. Meanwhile, Emma's dad is trying to get into Emma's room to figure out what the heck is going on, because he's so freaking confused. Just before he opens the door, she turns back to human, and her parents find her in a state with like fish all over her room. Also at 23:10, oh, there's been another casualty. Also at 23:10, the girls are drinking squash out of plastic cups again with some crisps, and Charlotte is angry at Lewis for bailing on their date at the marine park and spending all this time with Cleo and Ricky and Emma. I think my hand is less cramped up now, so I might hold my knife again. Okay, so in the next episode, not much happens besides Cleo is supposed to go on a camping trip with her family, but it's a full moon and she doesn't want to be without the girls. So she convinces Mr. Satori to let the girls go with her. And then Lewis is like, well, I've got to come too to help. And then Charlotte is like, well, I'm not letting you be with the girls alone. So next thing you know, they're all going camping together. Basically, they're going camping to Mako Island, and there's some shenanigans with the girls being struck by the moon, and they go out at night and Charlotte follows them and they do some pranks on her with their powers, and she has a horrible night. But something big happens, which is that Charlotte finds the moon pool and she sees it bubbling when the full moon is over the cave. She touches the water with her hand but doesn't get in. Then the next day, Charlotte is suspicious, but the girls kind of gaslight her into thinking that nothing weird happened. The girls get worried that Charlotte is now a mermaid because she touched the water, but Lewis pours water on her to test it while they're in the Juice Net Cafe, and then Charlotte is pissed. Also, it's really funny because Lewis has to share a tent with Mr. Satori. These guys are kind of like iconic bros, you know, like they hang out, and at first they kind of have an enemies to lovers arc, because basically season 3, Mr. Satori gets married to someone else and he asks Lewis to be his best man. So yeah, so basically it's just restless night for everybody on the island and everyone's up to some shit, and the only person who sleeps through the night is Donald, which is iconic. The next episode is brilliant because we get some slow burning romance between Emma and Ash. So the girls go to the Juice Net Cafe, and you'll never guess who's there. This man. And he's there doing some business studies, bruv. And Emma's really shady with him, even though she thinks he's really cute. And then we find out that Wilfred wants to speak to Emma, and she thinks that she's getting a promotion, so she's really excited. And then she finds out that Ash is getting the manager position at the cafe, and she's fucking fuming. She's fucking fuming. She's been working there for free drinks for the past year so she can have a cranberry juice, and now this man has got her job. And he immediately comes to the cafe and he makes loads of changes, like all in one day. And he's just like doing so much, you know? So he makes all the staff wear these new uniforms, and Emma hates them, and rightfully so, because the hat is ugly. He also puts basketball hoops in the cafe so people will play sports and then get out of breath and buy more drinks. It's implied that all these changes happen over like 2 weeks, and we find out it was all in one day. So it's kind of like Emma was rightfully upset. Meanwhile, Cleo is sad because Lewis spends all his time with Charlotte, what's new, and she never sees him. So they decide to have a friend hangout. But Charlotte gets really jealous and mad about Lewis seeing Cleo. So then there's some shit with Ash thinking that Emma is sabotaging his changes at the cafe and defying his orders, so he fires her. But then he later finds out that she didn't do it, and it was some other staff member that made a mistake that he blamed Emma for. So then he hires her back, and when he does, he asks her on a date to the movies, and it's just so cute because she's all like acting like she doesn't really care, but you can tell that she's absolutely buzzing about it. So the next episode is so fucking ridiculous, I can't even talk about it, so I just want to get it over with quickly. Basically, Nate is being desperate again, and he's trying to serenade Cleo on his guitar, And she's like, leave me alone, I will never date you. And then he offers to give her guitar lessons. We see a few flirty interactions with Emma and Ash, and this happens the day after their date. Zane speaks to Lewis, and he found this rare perfume on the internet that's apparently irresistible to mermaids. But the only thing is, it smells like absolute shit to anyone who isn't a mermaid. So Zane accidentally leaves the perfume on a counter in the Gooseneck Cafe, and Nate sprays it on himself. So then when Nate sprays it, all the customers leave the cafe because it smells so bad, but Emma smells him and it's irresistible to her. She's all over Nate. Cleo turns up and she smells the perfume too, and it has the same effect on her. So basically, now the girls are all Nate and they're just like horny and desperate for Nate, which is tragic to see. Ricky turns up and the same thing happens to her. Ash sees Emma being all like irresistible with Nate, and he goes and speaks to Lewis and Zane, and he's like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Like, I thought the date went really well, but she's all over Nate, and so is Ricky, and so is Cleo. And then the boys are like, hold on. So they go into the cafe, and the girls are dancing around Nate. Nate leaves the cafe, and then when he leaves, the girls go back to normal and they can't remember a thing that happened. But then when Nate comes back, they all have the same effect happening to them again, like they love Nate. So they decide to go to the beach together, and the girls nearly get in the water with Nate before Zane and Lewis turn up and stop them. When Nate gets in the sea, it washes the perfume off him, and then the spell's broken. Lewis throws the perfume away and tells the girls what they did, and they're so embarrassed. And then he's really upset because he liked her, and she's like, yeah, I can't explain it, but I'm sorry. And he's like, oh yeah, it was like he had an old boyfriend or something. And it's also really funny that these girls have like multiple love interests in high school. Like, I just can't relate. So next episode, Lewis has a bad dream about Cleo getting discovered for being a mermaid. Elliot and Kim go on a date to the marine park, and she's behaving like a selfish little brat. She's forcing Elliot to buy her gifts, presents, chocolate, ice cream with sprinkles, like everything. Lewis and Cleo are kind of like accompanying their date and like supervising them, and there's kind of like flirty vibes between them because Lewis buys Cleo this like keyring or something. Lewis's bad dream nearly comes true because Cleo gets splashed by this water ride, and she nearly gets seen by a bunch of people at the marine park when she's in mermaid form. Also, there's a weird subplot of Ricky and Ash spending a bit of time together because they're planning a surprise for Emma because she's going to be staff member of the month, and Emma thinks that they're dating and she's fuming about it. Also, Elliot dumps Kim because she's a piece of shit. In the next episode, it's basically another full moon shenanigans. Cleo and Ricky persuade Emma to go on another date with Ash. He turns up at her house to cook her dinner on the night of the full moon, and they're trying to have a romantic date, but Cleo and Ricky get moonstruck. So Cleo and Ricky are kind of acting like they're drunk or something, and they keep trying to get Emma to look at the moon and show her tail to Ash. So they go to the bathroom and they fill up a bath of water, and then they convince Emma to go to the bathroom, and then they shove her in the bath, even though like it's like one of those like annoying things in movies where like there's something behind her and they're walking towards her and she's walking backwards and she doesn't realize that she's about to fall into her bathtub, even though it's really obvious. Yeah, so then Emma is moonstruck. She falls in the bath and becomes a mermaid. They show the moon to her. And then when she's moonstruck, she calls out to Ash to like come to the bathroom because she has something to show him. And it's also like really sketchy because she's like in the bathroom. She's like, Ash, come to the bathroom. I want to show you something. And you're like... Then Lewis turns up at the house, luckily, before Ash sees anything, and he like gets him to leave. The next day, Emma doesn't remember a thing, but then goes down to the kitchen and sees all the food that Ash cooked for her. She's like, shit. So she goes to work and she can't really explain what was going on, but she's like, no, I do like you. And then she Then she kisses Ash, and it's really cute. The next episode is whatever, but basically Zane and Ash have an argument, and then Emma and Ricky have a fight because they're like defending their boyfriends. And Cleo, meanwhile, is trying to plan this like mermaid anniversary party, and then the girls miss it because they're mad at each other, and Cleo gets stood up. But then at the end of the episode, they apologize and say they shouldn't let boys get in the way of their friendship, and then they have a party in the moon pool. Also, a couple of side notes, we have a split screen phone call at the beginning of the episode. Also, Zane and Ash have a fight and an intense game of pool to try and prove who's the best, and the girls sabotage each other's boyfriends with their powers. Also, Charlotte and Lewis have a romantic fishing date. Also, we get a funny moment of the girls watching a slideshow of themselves in the moon pool, but where are these images being projected, and where is the projector, and where did they get professional photographs of themselves taken when they're in mermaid form? They're having a photographer follow them around and getting packed while they're in their flopping tails. So, the next few episodes are very important. A lot of big shit happens. So basically, Lewis discovers all this research that's been done on the moon pool and Mako Island by this guy called Max Hamilton. Exhibit A. He goes and speaks to him and asks him about his research, but he doesn't tell him about the girls. But then Max follows Lewis and sees Cleo, sees her wearing his necklace, and says under his breath, Gracie. Then Max says he'll help Lewis with his research if he gets him the necklace that Cleo is wearing, because it turns out that he made the necklaces and the original set. So Lewis doesn't tell Cleo and asks to borrow her necklace, and he says that he's going to fix it. And then he gives it to Max and finds out some info about Max's past and that he used to date one of the original mermaids. And she was called Gracie, and she was the love of his life. Lewis also tells Max that he isn't with Cleo anymore, and Max is like, oh, she's the one. You can tell because she can't stop smiling whenever she sees you. Cut to Lewis giving Cleo the necklace, and she can't stop smiling when she sees him. And it's just really heartbreaking because they should be together, but they're not. Charlotte starts to get suspicious about Lewis's research, and Lewis and Max go to Mako Island together, and we get this annoying flashback of like Max remembering his past, but it just looks really ugly. Yeah, I'll say it, Gracie seems really annoying. So Max goes to the moon pool, and Lewis tries to stop him in case Cleo is there, but she is. And then Max suspects that Cleo is a mermaid, and he starts quizzing her and being kind of mean. And like, oh, how did you get here if there's no boat here? And she's like, oh, I just swam. And he's like, oh, you can hold your breath for that long? And he clearly knows that she's a mermaid and he's trying to like bait her. Then he splashes water on her. She turns into a mermaid. And she's like, what the fuck? And then she's very scared. But he tells her that he isn't a threat, and he tells them about his former relationship with Gracie. It's just kind of annoying. It's like, just get over it. Like, this was a relationship you had when you were 16 and you're still pining after it and acting like it was the love of your life. Like, maybe it was, but I don't know. I feel like this always happens in movies where like men will have one relationship when they were like 12 and then they don't shut up about it for the rest of their life. And they act like they're really traumatized by it. It's like it literally happened 100 years ago. So Max tells Lewis that he should be with Cleo, and he gives him all his research on mermaids. The next episode, called The Gracie Code Part 2, is very, very important. So that episode was The Gracie Code Part 1. The next episode is Part 2, so it's like a 2-part episode. It's big. Long story short, I shoved a whole bag of jelly beans. Cleo's room is full of Max's research on Mako Island and mermaids. Also, Cleo's top is really creased at the start of the episode. So there's a picture of Gracie in Cleo's room, and there's also a film reel of footage that they need to get developed to see what's on it that Max gave them. Charlotte confronts Lewis about spending lots of time with Cleo and the girls. Ash has flirty interactions with Emma, and he asks her to hang out at the beach, and she's like, no, that's not my thing anymore. And he's like, oh, like, what happened? Do you not go there anymore? And she's like, yeah, I just don't want to talk about it. So she's like acting like there's some like big trauma that happened at the beach, so he's really concerned. Randomly, Charlotte turns up at Cleo's house, and she wants to ask about the research that she's doing with Lewis because she's very jealous and possessive. Then she sees the picture on the wall of Gracie, and she's like, what the heck? How do you have this photo? And then Cleo's like, oh, it's just part of our research. And she's like, research? What kind of research are you doing that involves my grandmother? So Gracie is Charlotte's grandmother, aka Annette's mum. The girls tell Lewis, and they're like, you need to find out what she knows about mermaids. So Lewis speaks to Charlotte. She tells him that her grandmother died when she was 6, and she always told stories about the sea. Then, in the picture, Charlotte spots that Gracie is wearing the same necklace that Cleo and the girls wear, and she's like, isn't that a massive coincidence? And Lewis is like, nah, it's probably like mass produced or something in the past, and it's just like coincidence. And Charlotte's like, There's a small side plot about Ash meeting Emma at the beach to help her get over her trauma. And then he tries to pick her up and put her in the water. She freaks out and gets upset because he didn't listen to her and she's not ready. He says that she's too closed off and she, it's difficult to date someone that won't tell you anything. She goes up to the edge of the water to show Ash that she's a mermaid, but then some people turn up at the beach. So she's like, forget about it. Forget about it. Then Charlotte quizzes her mum about her granny's taste in jewelry. And she's like, oh, like, do you think Granny would wear a necklace that was mass produced? And then her mum's like, absolutely not, babe, absolutely not. She would only like unique jewelry. So Charlotte's like, Lewis is lying because the jewelry was not mass produced. Charlotte breaks into Cleo's house. Yes, you heard me correctly. She breaks into Cleo's house and she steals the film reel. So Cleo goes home and she's like, someone's been in my room. And then we see a clip of Charlotte watching the film footage, and in the video we see Gracie jumping into the moon pool and turning into a mermaid. She is absolutely speechless and she shows it to Lewis and she's like, look, like, this is proof my grandmother was a mermaid. And he's like, no, it's absolutely CGI. So then Lewis tells the girls that Charlotte's seen the footage and they're very, very worried. It's just absolutely classic Lewis, saying to the girls that there's nothing to worry about and then saying that nobody will discover their secret, and then somebody does and they're like, Lewis, what the fuck? Just throwing them under the bus. So at the start of the next episode, the girls are worried and Charlotte is on the same mermaid bullshit and she's trying to find out all this stuff about her grandmother. So she finds out about Max and she decides that she needs to speak to him and ask about Gracie. So Lewis speaks to Max and tries to give him back the research, and he's like, don't tell anyone about this. But Charlotte spies on Lewis and sees him talking to Max, so she knows that he's lying. So Charlotte goes and speaks to Max and she's like, I'm Gracie's granddaughter. And he confirms that she was a mermaid, and Charlotte is beyond thrilled. She's so hyped about this news. To make matters even worse, it's a full moon tonight and the girls are trying to organise a sleepover and a school night so they can be together. Charlotte confronts Lewis and she's like, I know that you know something about mermaids. Why are you hiding it from me? And he keeps on lying to her. And then she watches back the video and she notices the moon pool in the background. She's like, hold on. I know where that is because she went there when they were having a sleepover camping trip on Mako Island. She hires a boat and goes back to Mako Island. She goes to the moon pool and then hears voices, so she hides behind a rock. And then the girls swim into the moon pool. She sees that they're mermaids and overhears them talking about the moon. She puts two and two together and she's like, shit, this is how I turn into a mermaid. The girls at this point are truly going through it because they are so stressed and confused, and Lewis is still being classic Lewis, and he's like, it's fine, she doesn't know shit, but he doesn't realise that she knows literally everything. Also, Lewis feels like shit for lying to Charlotte and letting down his friends, and he decides he needs to break up with Charlotte. Meanwhile, Charlotte is in the moon pool, and she's there at full moon. She sees the pool bubble and sparkle, so she jumps in. Cut to the next day. The girls are happy because they had a sleepover, and this was the first full moon when nothing bad happened to them. Also, the girls are like, oh, we saw you having a deep chat with Lewis. What was that about? And Cleo's like, maybe he's going to break up with Charlotte, and she's kind of happy about it. So Lewis goes to meet Charlotte at the docks to break up with her. And then she's like, don't worry, Lewis. There doesn't have to be any secrets between us anymore. And then she jumps into the sea and she's a mermaid. And Lewis is disgusted. He could not react more badly to this piece of information, but Charlotte is completely buzzing about it. She's so happy. So, next episode, we see Charlotte swimming in the ocean doing mermaid stuff. And then who does she see but Charlotte? And she is absolutely shocked. She couldn't be more absolutely, what the heck is going on? I'm so shocked and disgusted by this news. So she sprints to school. She's so out of breath. And she gets there and she's trying to tell the girls what she's seen. And they're like, yeah, we know, Charlotte's a mermaid. Lewis just told us. He's like, I think you should be nice to her and try and include her in your mermaid gang. And he speaks to Charlotte and he's like, you should let the girls help you because they know a lot about being mermaids. And she's like, I don't need their help. Meanwhile, the girls, these girls, they're failing gym class because they've been flunking their swimming lessons and they're told they need to join the beach volleyball team to pass the class. So Lewis speaks to the girls and he's like, please help out Charlotte, and everyone votes yes, but Ricky's like, absolutely not, I do not trust this girl with my life, and Cleo reluctantly agrees to help her. So they meet with Charlotte and they each show her their powers, and they ask Charlotte to show them her powers, but she's like, oh, I don't have any powers. Charlotte is disappointed, but the girls are secretly happy that she doesn't have powers. So the girls go to beach volleyball and they find out that Charlotte is the fourth member on their team. They play together, but they're not very good. And Charlotte is being very cocky and acting like she doesn't need their help for being a mermaid. Also, Charlotte is at the Juice Net Cafe having yellow juice with a bit of pineapple on the lid. Then she accidentally moves the glass with her hand and she goes round to Cleo's house and she's like, oh my God, I found my fourth power. Also, Ricky is like ranting about how there shouldn't be a fourth mermaid, and Charlotte is like, oh my God, babe, I found my power. And it's the same power as Cleo. So Cleo's mega fuming. Then we have the beach volleyball tournament. Charlotte gets wet and then dries herself off, and they cheat using their powers to win the match. Then at 21:40, we get another sleigh montage of the girls with the classic sleigh music. After the match, Ricky's like, hold on, how did you dry yourself off so quick at the match? And then Charlotte's like, oh wait, yeah, I guess I have a second power and I have your power, Ricky. Ricky's fucking fuming about this. Then Charlotte's like, oh wait, and guess what? I also have your power, Emma. Bruh. Charlotte has all 3 powers and she's like, I guess I'm some kind of super mermaid. Okay. The girls are fuming, and in the next episode, Charlotte gets dangerous. So she gets a bit power hungry with her powers and she uses them for bad. So at the start, Charlotte snubs the girls' offer for mermaid lessons and it's very rude. And then Lewis meets her at the marine park and is like, you need to give them a chance. They're trying to help you. Lewis leaves Charlotte at the marine park and Charlotte's left on her own, and she goes over to the dolphin pen where Ronnie is, and then the dolphin starts splashing her. She thinks the dolphin is attacking her, so she gets in the water and tries to boil the dolphin using her powers by heating up the water. The dolphin, poor little Ronnie, is screaming, crying his eyes out, and it's just disgusting behavior. Like, let that sink in for a minute. She tried to boil a dolphin. Not only this, but while she's doing this, she's in full tail mode where anyone could see her at the marine park. Cleo turns up at the tank and she's like, babe, what the fuck do you think you're doing trying to kill a mermaid? So she's like, Emma needs to give you some lessons. So Emma gives her a lesson on controlling her powers in the freezer at the Juice Net Cafe. And she's like, see, look, I can freeze just 1 grape at a time. She's like, can you do that? And then Charlotte's like, yeah. And then she freezes 1 grape and Emma's like, okay, cool. And Charlotte is just really mean and patronizing. Also, Charlotte gaslights the dolphin into thinking that it was the dolphin's fault for her boiling it, which is just not true. So basically, Nate has a fight with Lewis when Nate accidentally crashes his jet ski when trying to disrupt Lewis's fishing. Nate threatens to kill Lewis if he doesn't pay for the damage of his jet ski. Charlotte is mad about this, and when Nate goes onto Lewis's boat to try and steal it as revenge, Charlotte uses her powers on Nate and makes the boat in the water topple around. Everyone at the docks is watching this happen because they're like, how is the boat moving on its own? The girls are fuming because Charlotte could have exposed them and loads of people are questioning what happened to Nate. So the girls speak to Lewis and they're like, you need to be careful with Charlotte. You need to teach her to be more considerate of us. The beginning of the next episode, Charlotte is cocky and awful. She can set fire to things with her powers and she thinks she's better than the other girls. So Charlotte speaks to the girls about Lewis's upcoming birthday party and Cleo's like, yeah, I have a really good idea for a party, a boat party. And then Charlotte is like, ooh, no, I know Lewis better than he knows himself and he'll love a surprise party. So Charlotte starts planning a surprise party at her house with her mum catering, and she asks Cleo and the girls for ideas but then ignores all their ideas and asks them to do boring tasks. There's also an iconic line where Charlotte says, oh, is there anything you want my mum to cook for the party? Ricky starts like taking the piss. She's just having a laugh and she's like, ooh, can she make watermelon cubes with trout and sprigs of mint? And then Charlotte's like, yeah, she can do that. She also asked Ricky to do the music for the party and she's like, stick with mainstream music because your taste is questionable. And then Ricky's like, well, if you knew anything about Lewis, you'd know that we like the same music. And then Charlotte's like, his tastes have grown recently. Ricky gets mad and says she wants nothing to do with the party and she hangs out with Zayn instead. The girls try and convince her to join in, but she says she won't do it if Charlotte is there. Then we have the surprise party, which is a complete flop. None of Lewis's friends are there, it's all Charlotte's friends and it's super fancy. Also, the food is bad. And at 11:44, Ash is speaking straight facts and is like, why would you throw a party for someone and then invite someone they don't even know? Exactly, Ash. Anyway, Lewis arrives at the party. Charlotte wants the girls out the way, so she sends them to the basement to get something, but then she locks them in the room and breaks the water pipe so the room won't dry and they'll be stuck in there in their mermaid form. So they're trapped and Lewis is like, where are my friends? Like, there's no one here that I know. Then Ash hears them trapped in the room and he's like, don't worry, I'll get you out of there. But they're like, no, don't, we're just having a girl talk. But really it's because if he opens the door, he'll see their flopping tails. So the girls call Ricky for help and she starts heading over there, but Ash starts hacking away at the door where the girls are in and the girls are so stressed. Just in the nick of time, Ricky arrives, saves the day. She gets Ash away and she sees the water leaking from underneath the door, puts 2 and 2 together and she's like, fuck, they're in there as mermaids. So she breaks in, she dries the room with her powers and saves them. And this is just like a brilliant metaphor for sticking together, teamwork, they're stronger as a group kind of vibes. Lewis speaks to Charlotte and he's like, what the fuck is this music? And she's like, it's my cousin's jazz band. He's also like, oh, most of the people at this party are strangers. And she's like, don't be silly, I've known them my whole life. Which is just classic Charlotte being manipulative and disgusting. The party boat pulls up, Cleo and Ricky and Emma are on the boat. Charlotte's like, how the fuck did you get out of this room? And then Lewis bails the party to be with the girls and Charlotte is fuming. So the next episode is pretty dark, just a warning for you guys. So it starts with Cleo leaving the house without doing the washing up because Kim isn't doing it like she was paid to do. Her dad is mad about this. Charlotte speaks to Lewis and she's like, oh, the girls are being so mean to me. They've iced me out and I don't want you to see them anymore. And he's like, excuse me? She tells Lewis not to be friends with the girls anymore. And she's like, oh, I'm just asking for a bit of loyalty. She specifically asks him to stay away from Cleo. So Cleo speaks to the girls and she says she's feeling the pressure rise a bit. Her dad's annoyed at her for not doing the washing up. Then Lewis calls her and says he can't see her for a while because of Charlotte, so she's upset. Her dad is even more mad at her for leaving the house again without washing up. He tries to get her to do the washing up with him there and she's like, but there's no gloves. He's like, oh, you don't need them. She gets all panicked and runs out the house because she can't do the dishes because then she'd be a big flopping mess. She runs away. She bumps into Charlotte and Charlotte is being mean to her about Lewis and she's like, oh, he never liked you. He only helped you because he felt sorry for you. Then she starts trying to attack Cleo with her powers and then Cleo falls over and she steals Cleo's necklace from her neck. She pulls it off. It's giving Ella Enchanted. Charlotte finds Lewis and she's like, oh, look, Cleo gave me this necklace. And he's like, that doesn't sound like Cleo. She loves that necklace. But then she asks Lewis to put the necklace on her. And then she times it so that Cleo sees this when she walks into the Juice Net Cafe. Then she kisses Lewis right when Cleo is looking. Also, Lewis looks really uncomfortable when this is happening. This man is in hell. So Cleo goes to the beach and tries to call Lewis, but Charlotte blocks her number and steals Lewis's phone. So Cleo leaves this really depressing voice message where she's like, I thought you'd always have my back, but you don't. And then we see her running away to Mako, swimming away to Mako, if you will. Then Emma and Ricky get a call from Cleo's dad saying that Cleo's gone missing and she still isn't home and it's getting late. So the girls see Mr. Satori and he's really worried. So they go and search for her at Mako, but she hides from them behind some coral because she wants to be alone, babe. Lewis is at the Juice Net Cafe with Charlotte and then she leaves to order drinks and then he hears his phone beeping from inside her bag and he listens to this message from Cleo and he's like, fuck. The girls then find Lewis to get him to help find Cleo. Lewis asks Max for advice and he's like, I should have listened to you when you told me to hold on to her. And Max tells Lewis that Gracie also found the balance between being a normal girl and a mermaid really hard. He said whenever she was having a bad day, she'd go to the shark breeding ground, the north of Mako. But he was like, oh, if Cleo's weak, the sharks will sense that and they might hurt her, so she might need your help. So then we see this shot of Cleo hiding under the sea because there are sharks around her. She's trapped and she's absolutely surrounded by them, bruv. Lewis heads to his boat. Lewis heads to Lewis's boat to go and help Cleo. Charlotte turns up and tries to stop him and he breaks up with her and he's like, I never want to see you again. And he's like, oh, did Cleo really give you that necklace? And she's like, of course not, but she's weak and she deserved it. This girl, honestly. So Lewis heads to Mako Island. He dives in the water and finds Cleo and rescues her and we get a really emotional moment when he helps her. Then they have a big old heart-to-heart on the beach and a big chat and Lewis is like, oh, I really screwed up and you mean everything to me and I broke up with Charlotte. And then he's like, I just want it to be you and me again. And then Cleo's like, do you mean as friends? And then he's like, I mean a lot more than friends. And then they kiss and it's really fucking cute. So they're back together now. And there's also really a lot of chemistry between them and it feels very natural. And nice. I think they maybe dated in real life. I'm getting that kind of vibe. Meanwhile, the girls are waiting for Cleo and they're going out of their minds. Mr. Satori is sick with worry. Cleo shows up and it's really emotional because Mr. Satori is very relieved and he cries and Cleo's like, you can thank Lewis. Mr. Satori thanks Lewis. He's like, oh, she means everything to me. And Mr. Satori is like, you can always talk to me, Cleo. I'm like, okay, now I'm crying. The girls see Lewis and Cleo holding hands and they're like, yay, you're back together again. And they're all cute and smiling and it's nice. Meanwhile, back in Charlotte's lair, she's crying and we get this completely busted screenshot as she brings this pile of water up into the air and then she morphs it into Cleo's face and then she freezes it and smashes it on the ground. So that's where we get frozen Cleo. and Charlotte is crying as well. So we're on the season finale episode, which is called Unfathomable. It starts off with Clueless, Cleo and Lewis, and they're being really cute and coupley, and it turns out, of course, that it's a full moon, because when is it not when it's the season finale? So it's an extra powerful one tonight, and they really need to prepare. So they see Charlotte sitting alone in the Gooseneck Cafe, and they're like, oh, we should probably warn her about the full moon. And she's like, I don't need your advice. So she says that she's more of a mermaid than all of them put together. She creates a gust of wind and sends them flying into the air. Ash walks out the cafe at this very moment and sees them just as they fall, and he's like, what the fuck just happened? Max tells Lewis that the full moon is very special because it's a planetary alignment and the moon can take away what it gave. And Lewis is like, oh yeah, like the lunar eclipse where it takes away your powers for 12 hours. And he's like, no bruv, it can take away their powers forever. Dun dun dun. Just had a casualty with Dr. Satori. Donald Satori, sorry. He's a fisherman. The girls are bruised and injured after being attacked by Charlotte, and Lewis speaks to Charlotte and he's like, you can't use your powers against the girls, it's really out of line. And she's like, oh, I just wanted to be together again. And he's like, so the girls are preparing for their sleepover when Ash turns up to speak to Emma. Meanwhile, the moon is rising and Charlotte is ignoring their advice, and she's being feral outside when the moon is out. The girls are in Emma's house waiting for Ash to leave when they hear the water in the pipes moving around, and then all the taps start running and everything's being super weird, and it's like the house is possessed. So Ash is like, what the fuck is going on? And why is there always weird stuff like this happening around you? And then the fridge starts rattling and a massive blob of water rises out of the sink and splashes Ash, and he's literally like, what is going on? So the girls are like, this must be Charlotte. So they go outside and lo and behold, Charlotte is messing with the pipes. Lewis speaks to her and he's like, that's enough. You need to stop. And then he gets a light bulb moment and he's like, why don't we go to Mako Island together? So Lewis texts Cleo and he's like, I'm going to Mako with Charlotte. And Cleo's like, we should go after him. But the girls convince her to stay. So Lewis is at Mako Island with Charlotte, and then Emma is still at home fighting with Ash, and he gets mad at her for not telling him what's going on, so he leaves. Ricky comes in and she's like, bruv, Cleo's gone. Cleo's at the moon pool, and then Charlotte's like, yeah, I knew if I came here, then she would follow you, and that's what I wanted all along. And then Charlotte is like, Lewis, why didn't you tell her what's happening tonight? And Lewis is like, whoever's in the moon pool where the moon rises could lose their powers forever. And also, it's the first time in 50 years that the planets are aligned with the moon, so it's implied that Gracie lost her powers this time 50 years ago with the same planetary alignment. So Ricky and Emma head over to Mako Island. Cleo secretly asks Lewis to distract Charlotte whilst the girls come into the moon pool. But then Charlotte spots some steam coming from the pool and she beats up Lewis. She shoves him to the ground, which is so rude. And it's like, if you have a crush on someone, don't shove them to the ground, as if. So the girls all walk in a human form and they're like, slay, we're here to beat you, Charlotte. But Charlotte uses her powers on the girls. Charlotte uses her powers on them and she's really strong, and she makes this water snake that wraps around them. But the girls band together one last time and they try and use their powers to defeat her. Also at 1812, you get this weird spinning POV shot. So it's like POV from Charlotte spinning around as the girls hold her up in the air, and it's very weird. Then they hold her up in the air directly above the moon pool, and then right as the moon is over the top of the cave, they drop her in. So Charlotte falls in the pool and she loses her powers, and the girls are triumphant and pleased with themselves. Next day, Charlotte speaks to Lewis and she sort of apologizes, but she's like, yeah, I guess I wasn't cut out for being a mermaid, but it's only because I liked you so much. And I'm like, as if that's a fucking excuse. Then Lewis is like, oh, you're forgetting one thing. And then Charlotte gives Lewis back the necklace and he returns it to Cleo. So Ricky is like, oh, this is getting close to the worst kept secret of all time. And then Emma's like, yeah, and it's about to get a bit less secret. And then we see the girls with their respective love interests. So Lewis with Cleo, Ricky with Zane, Ash with Emma. They're all at the beach. And then the girls dive into the ocean and we see the iconic opening shot from the intro song, and then they turn into mermaids and Ash sees and he's like, cool. So we see the boys grinning and looking at their girlfriends and they're so proud of them, and then the girls swim away. There's also very Triwizard Tournament lake vibes, because now what are the boys looking at? They're just waiting on the beach for the girls to return and they can't see shit in the water, so they're just staring at the sea and the girls are somewhere in the ocean. So that's season 2. I'm going to put my knife down because my hand is cramping. But basically, yeah, that's season 1 and 2 of H20, Just Add Water. Maybe I'll do season 3, I don't know. I'm going to take a lot of persuading to do it because this was a lot of work. Yeah, let me have a sip of my coffee and we'll do a bit of a brief rundown analysis. Basically, bruv, season 1, Emma's the main girl, Cleo's the main girl, Ricky's also a main girl. They all have powers. Then, at the start of the season, there's freak weather incidents at Mako Island and their powers get even stronger. They're trying to control them. The strength of the powers breaks up Lewis and Cleo because she feels like she needs some space to sort herself out. Then, Charlotte steps into town. She's a menace from day one. She has a crush on Lewis. There's some shit with Hector. He gets ill. Emma gets ill. Lewis's boat is still running. Gracie comes into the picture. Max comes into the picture. We find out about former mermaids. This is kind of the first time we hear about old mermaids, but I guess it's interesting because that means that Louise Chatham was a mermaid at the same time that Gracie was a mermaid, which is interesting. So they were together, like as friends. Ronnie nearly gets boiled. Neil and Lisa try to have a sexy date and then Emma goes feral and steals all their fish. Elliot has worse taste in women, but at least like someone his own age. Terry Chadwick gets his motorbike vandalized by Nate, who's not on the board, R.I.P. Nate, but Zane makes it up with him. We finally see Ricky's family. Also, it's implied that Ricky's mum left. We don't know what happened to her, but she's got a single dad. Yeah, that's pretty much everything. So, if you watched this video, which I doubt anyone did because it's feral and unhinged, but if anyone did watch this video, thank you for watching it. It took a lot of work, and yeah, I guess I'll see you in the new year for more shenanigans. But yeah, thanks for watching. If you liked it, let me know. If you say anything mean about me, I will delete my channel. And yeah, thanks. Okay, that's cringe.